Chapter 4904. It is not a minority to devour external forces to strengthen oneself, and to use this peculiar ability to do the top cultivation of one's own methods, or to grow immortals. This secret method is extremely powerful, and the only drawback is that the external force absorbed is too complicated and requires constant time to digest and purify. However, there is actually a simple and rude way to deal with cultivating immortals based on this secret method. That is to try to release one's own strength, burst the place to death. This method is indeed feasible, but if you are not careful, it is also very likely to be a way of giving away your head. So even if Yin Xian knew this method, he wouldn't try it easily. Facing nearly 30 dead immortals, Xu Yang did not even dare to breathe. They don't feel pain. Even if their limbs are cut off in battle, they can release the last energy in the fairy body. Jia Jia, be swallowed with peace of mind, and become my servant. Hypodianxian Yuyin reappeared at the corner of the sky, watching this scene with gloomy eyes. Stupid guy. Jian Wushuang shook his head slightly. He didn't stop at the slightest, and directly urged his figure to face the 30 dead immortals resolutely. Ancestral technique, the gate of power. The magnificent Tianmen condensed, and then a giant finger to the sky came out from the Tianmen and smashed all the dead immortals. However, nearly 30 dead immortals did not evade. All opened their mouths and formed a strange suction force, and they actually swallowed this ancestral magic. After swallowing, the meridians on each of their immortal bodies exuded a strange huaza, which was extremely strange. The next moment the war broke out. They all rushed madly at Jian Wushuang and the others, and soon surrounded them tightly. Seeing this scene of Yuyin, he smiled triumphantly, but his smile solidified before it even stretched out completely. Thousands of dazzling lights burst out of the encirclement, like a blazing sun that cannot be looked directly at, dazzling to the extreme. Then, the encirclement composed of nearly 30 dead immortals shattered, and nearly half of the dead immortals on the spot were turned into powder and could no longer be reborn. As the huamang flowed, there was a figure with Xuanhe pattern flowing all over, holding an invisible sword and slowly walking out. Xuyang and Fengshan followed closely, and their eyes were extremely surprised. I thought it would be a battle, but it ended in a flash. They only saw that Jian Wushuang completely released Yanli once, and then everything was over. The encirclement was blasted open, and only a dozen of the 30 dead immortals were left, and it was already out of the question. Seeing this, Yuyin didn't put down any cruel words, but instead just fled away. The remaining 10 or so dead immortals were all a little afraid, and couldn't stop backing. But Jian Wushuang didn't plan to let them go. In this treacherous universe, any unstable factor was extremely important. Reaching out his hand to directly tie up all the dead immortals, and then crush them into powder, Jian Wushuang looked at the place where Yuyin disappeared. Then he directly chased after him. Fengshan did not hesitate, and followed Jian Wushuang. Xu Yang looked at the disappearing back. His eyes were extremely hot, and a warlike mood surged in his heart. Yu Yun's whereabouts disappeared extremely fast, but under Jian Wushuang's chase, he quickly noticed his escape route. This treacherous universe is considered to be a super universe, and the entire universe plane is several times larger than the ordinary universe. It should have derived a lot of energy to the extreme, but at this moment it was replaced by a heavy death. With the continuous progress, the ruined hall and the huge tomb become the main color here, and Yu Yun's ghostly figure flees to a huge black mountain range. Jian Wushuang arrived instantly, looking at the lonely and strange mountain gate in front of him. He directly stretched out his hand. Suddenly, a kind of power that belonged to the suppression of the laws of heaven directly cut the Black Mountain mountains in half. In an instant, endless death energy gushed out from the mountains, and the heavens and the earth changed. Even Jian Wushuang had to release his strength to protect himself from the erosion of death. As the Heishan Mountains were cut in half by Jian Wushuang, the scenes in it were exposed. Countless dark caves emerged, and there were ruined halls, which were extremely curious. Xuyang and Fengshan arrived later, and they all frowned when they saw this scene. It seems that this should be the nest of Yuyin, Xuyang said, his eyes solemn. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and went straight to the Heishan Mountains. Walking in the Black Mountains, countless caves spitting out death are all mysterious to the extreme. And it can be seen that the dead bones that have long lost their color collapse in front of the cave, and even the slightest wind blows them into a handful of fly ash. Here it is completely purgatory. Jian Wushuang frowned, and he felt endless resentment in these lifelessness. As he kept walking forward, a palm suddenly protruded from a cave and grabbed his robe. Help! Reaching out his hand to stop Feng Shan, who was about to do it, Jian Wushuang turned and looked at the owner of the palm. It was an immortal, but it was already an immortal whose source was broken and resembling withered bones. As soon as the wind blows, it may fall apart. He opened his deflated eye sockets and was about to lose life. Jian Wushuang waved away a burst of power and enveloped him. Suddenly he, who was originally like a dead bone, filled up in an instant, and even his cheeks were flushed. But this is just a return to light. His fairy source has been shattered, and his divine body has been messed up. If it hadn't been for Jian Wushuang to give him a strength, I am afraid he would have died just now. Many thank you, sir, for allowing me to survive for a while. Na Yinxian let out a sigh, as if he already knew his situation. Jian Wushuang looked at him and asked, "Do you have anything to say?" He nodded, and pain flashed in his eyes. "Yes, what I want to tell the adults is that now you can go as far as you go. This is a complete scam. The so-called proving to be immortal, from the beginning to the end, is the old dog's lie. The price paid for this path of cultivation is really too great. I was originally a disciple of one of the most prosperous sects in the Blue Territory. Later, the master of the sect ran away angry, and the Lord sent 12 disciples of the clan to look for. I was one of those 12 disciples. Shang Qian, it is very difficult to travel through the heavens, and we have suffered some changes, so that our disciples are all separated. I can't return to the sect for a while. I can only live in the sky, but I never thought that all this would be the beginning of my nightmare." When he said this, there was still some horror in his eyes, as if it had been such a long time that he could not forget that day. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4905. Jian Wushuang didn't interrupt his memory. He felt that there was a certain connection in it. He breathed for a moment, and then continued. I was alone, living in the heavens, and accidentally came to a heaven with plenty of power, where I saw an immortal who could reach the sky, opening a dojo and talking after discussing the Tao. I also sat down and listened to the Tao, and soon I was immersed in his argument. He assured us that as long as he joins his seat, the talented top cultivation will surely be in the position of eternal immortality within 1 Chinese year. Even if it is not the top cultivation, it will give birth to immortal roots within several Chinese years. Reach unimaginable heights. Under that forum, there were more than 100,000 top repairs with him, and I was one of them. I thought this was a road with a bright future, but I never thought that this road of spiritual practice would make me unstoppable. Speaking of this, Jian Wushuang and others were already able to guess the outline. The person Ding Xiao spoke of must be the black-robed Dian immortal Yian. He wandered through the heavens and opened the dojo, attracting waves of Ding Xiao and even Yinxian to follow him. Then he was taken to his lair and absorbed the origin to strengthen himself. And the result was naturally as Jian Wushuang thought. After Yian brought them back here, he exposed his fangs, bound them, and absorbed the origin, but the process was more cruel. After the old dog brought us here, he no longer concealed it. He directly divided us into 3, 6, or 9 classes. The lowest rank, the base, is very huge. There are tens of thousands. The old dog directly slaughtered them to death, made every monk into a soul amber, and distributed it to the middle-rank monks for them. Absorb. And after the middle-level monks were forced to ingest these soul ambers, their strength has been rapidly improved, but waiting for them are the highest-level top cultivators. The old dog did the same, and slaughtered the middle-level monks to death, and made the soul amber to provide the highest-level top repairers. And I, because of my unique talents, was classified to the highest level, and I would consume 100,000 soul ambers every 10,000 years. During this period, my realm greatly increased, and I successfully broke through to Yanxian, and there were more than 50 people in the same situation as me. However, what awaits us is something more cruel. Only then did I know that even if you become an immortal, it is just a pawn. There was a bit of bitterness in his eyes, and at the same time the fairy body was rapidly drying up and was about to die. After becoming a fairy, I thought I would have the ability to compete with him, but I didn't expect to return to the sky. We were all made into futons by more than 50 of us, sucking our fairy source day and night. This situation has lasted for several years, and all those who have been drained of the source of the immortal source have been made into slaves of the dead immortal for him to drive. And in order not to be made a slave by him, I frantically devoured the rest of the immortal source and lived to the end, and I also escaped the devil's cave while he was leaving. I was thinking of staying away from this place completely, but I didn't expect that my Xianyuan was completely broken, and there was no possibility of survival. If I didn't meet an adult today, I'm afraid I wouldn't be able to say all these things. When he said this, he was faint and dying. This old thing is really a beast. For his own sake, so many repairs have been lost in vain. It should be 1,000 cuts, Fengshan said bitterly, and then coldly looked at Xu Yang on the side. Look at what I do. I don't have any intersection with him. I just heard something, Xu Yang quickly explained. You didn't see that guy even wanted to start. Then why are you in the same camp? Fengshan asked again. Xu Yang's complexion was a little embarrassed, and then he said with a serious face, I have no comment on this, but since that Yuan dares to do something to me, then I will have him die under my gun. Fengshan nostril snorted, and then stopped speaking. In his opinion, even Xu Yang's all-out effort could not compare to Jian Wushuang's hand. Jian Wushuang slowly squatted down, looking at Yanxian in front of him, and said, I've been tired for so long, so it's time for a good sleep. Reluctantly opening his shriveled eyelids, Na Yanxian smiled reluctantly. Thank you, sir. It's time to get a good night's sleep. From the day I found my wife to the present, I haven't had a good night's sleep. Now I can finally sleep. What's the name of your sect? Jian Wushuang asked in a soft voice. This was exactly what he asked on a whim. It seemed that he was opening the dusty memory, and finally he slowly said, My lord, it is called Shangqing Pavilion. It is located in Qingzhou in a very distant heaven. The scenery is very good. The masters and mothers are very kind to me. It is a pity. After all, I won't see them for the last time. After speaking these last words, Na Yanxian finally fell, and the immortal body that had long been unable to support directly turned into a withered bone and dispersed with the wind. Jian Wushuang's heart moved slightly, and his calm state of mind seemed to remember the past. The girl who was reckless and courageous had walked out of Qingzhou and followed him in Diqing to the sky. She is called Ziqingqi, and she is the daughter of the lord of the Shangqing Pavilion. And the dead Yanxian right now is also one of the 12 disciples in the Shangqing Pavilion. Everything seems to be such a coincidence, but it seems like in the dark. Jian Wushuang sighed secretly, and then saw a jade slip the size of a finger in the dry bone. He raised his hand and picked up the jade slip, only to see the word Shuhuan engraved on it. After several Chinese years, it was still fresh. Perhaps this jade is simply the identity of the dying immortal. When he was enduring the suffering, it must be the Shangqing Pavilion where he was trained and enlightened when he was young. Put the jade slip in your arms. Yu reads www. Akanshu. Calm Jian Wushuang turned around and looked at the dilapidated hall in the deepest part of the Heishan Mountains, his eyes sharpened to the extreme. Boom! The hall was shattered, and even the entire mountain range couldn't bear the power and collapsed. Headed by Jian Wushuang, Shuyang and Fengshan bombarded either side with their full strength. Beast, get out for Laozi and die. Fengshan burst into tears, a series of violent attacks, easily smashing any visible objects. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword and walked towards the dark hall, at the forefront step by step. In front of this dark hall, under the huge and towering black pine trees, there are more than a dozen broken immortal bodies stationed, looking into the eyes. Everywhere is full of death and desolation. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 4906. Immediately afterwards, a series of sore bone cracks sounded. The broken immortal body, guarding outside the temple gate, moved at this moment. Without exception, they are all dead immortals, without their own consciousness, just like corpses. Click. The headed dead fairy seemed to have fallen for a long time, and almost only the fairy bones were left, and it could be said that there was no fighting power. Jian Wushuang walked in the forefront, and with a direct wave of his hand, he wiped out the dead immortal who dared to step forward, leaving no trace. But in an instant, all the more than 10 dead immortals disappeared. This huge temple, based on the infinite Black Mountain Range, is the center of this treacherous universe, and it is also the most deadly place. Feng Shan then stepped forward, guarded Jian Wushuang, rushed directly into the giant hall, and then began to wreak havoc. He smashed a few large holes on the roof of the temple, and a dim light came in, barely seeing the scene in the temple. The hall is old, and the ground and walls under the feet are covered by crimson blood veins, just like an azure field. And the blood tendons are like living creatures creeping slowly. Something that pretends to be a ghost. Grandpa will kill you, Feng Shan said solemnly. Between the opening and closing of his palms, a giant say-like power poured out and exploded directly in this hall. A bad premonition suddenly rose in Jian Wushuang's heart. But before he even had time to give aid, Feng Shan was in deep crisis. The sudden change, a total of tens of millions of blood veins, like a prey-smelling blood, all revived, and the sky was covered by the sun to catch it. Yanli was swallowed by countless blood tendons, and then he was entangled in blood tendons and dragged into the abyss. Jian Wushuang slashed out with a single sword, only severing thousands of blood veins, and ultimately failed to stop it. Without any hesitation, he flew directly to the depths of the giant hall. Xu Yang's heart also shuddered, and then he followed Jian Wushuang closely. He couldn't tell why he wanted to make this move, he just left by feeling. The huge hall was dilapidated, and there was an abyss in the deepest part of the sky, where even light could not penetrate into it. Numerous blood veins as thick as a real dragon entangled each other in the abyss, to the extreme. Jian Wushuang held an invisible sword, and Xuanhe divine marks flowed all over his body, making it impossible to approach any filth. This abyss seemed to have no end, as if at the other end of the heaven. Boom! The rubble splashed, and 2 blood tendons that were several times stronger than the real dragon were chopped to the ground, twisting frantically. Immediately afterwards, a figure with a god-patterned figure holding a long sword appeared, followed by Xu Yang, holding a silver spear. Under this abyss, there is a vast dojo. No light can shine here, it is very strange. In the center of this vast dojo, Jian Wushuang saw that a huge futon made of flesh and blood was slowly creeping. This huge futon is actually made up of dead immortals, and at a glance there are no fewer than hundreds of them. At the same time, on this futon, the black-robed Dian immortal Yuyan was sitting on it, with a haggard face staring at Jian Wushuang bitterly. This seat miscalculated. This seat should not lead the wolf into the room and drag you into my heaven, he said viciously. Jian Wushuang glanced at him obliquely and said coldly, "Stop talking nonsense, put him back. I will spare your life." Yuyan suddenly stood up from the futon, his collapsing eye sockets bursting with red light. "Are you really sure you will take me? I can kill you the first time, and naturally I can kill you the second time. Do you still want to try?" Jian Wushuang's eyes gradually became cold. "Let's try that seat today. If you win me, I will return him to you." Yuyan shouted loudly, his arms shook, and immediately a blood vein with a thickness of 1,000,000 feet emerged from the dark. And Fengshan's figure was firmly fixed at the top of the blood tendons, unable to move at all. Yuyan still wanted to speak, but Jian Wushuang obviously didn't want to talk nonsense, and directly lifted his sword towards him. He was shocked and hurriedly manipulated the infinite lifelessness to respond. Kacha kacha. The ground shattered, and suddenly huge claws protruded from the ground, all of them madly grabbing at Jian Wushuang. Upon seeing this, Xu Yang hurriedly picked up the silver spear in his hand to clear the way for him. Wushuang Kendo, Zingehahe Jianini, the first style. Star. The lofty and magnificent sword intent gathers in the front line. The momentum is like the sky, directly cut forward. The sword intent broke out completely, and countless on pillars burst along the way, shattering the giant claws protruding from the ground. This sword is the sword with the highest burst of group damage, and can easily wipe out the threat. Yu Yin was shocked. The sword intent that suffocated him struck again, and he was forced to shoot. Standing on the high futon, he put his hands together, and then suddenly opened. Swallow. In an instant, the futon under his feet squirmed. All the overlapping dead immortals struggled painfully. All opened their mouths, forming a peculiar suction. Under this suction force, that sword intent was directly divided and eaten. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly, and he felt unusual. Xu Yang came behind him and said solemnly, "The futon sitting on Yu Yin has a problem, and can swallow all damage." He nodded, not eager to do it. At this time Fengshan, who was hung on the blood, yelled anxiously, "My lord, go quickly, don't stay here. There is a problem with this old thing." Without finishing a sentence, Yu Yin directly stretched out his hand to release a mass of blood and knocked him out. "It's really noisy." Then, Yu Yin gave a weird smile, and his figure suddenly disappeared in the air. Upon seeing this, Xu Yang's complexion changed drastically, and Chao Jian Wushuang leaned forward without a trace. Between Yanxian and Dianxian, it is like being separated by a moat. Not to mention that Yu Yin is such an extremely tricky Dianxian. Yu reading www.akenangshu.com. It can be said that as long as Yu Yin moves the killing mind, even though the sun is invincible in the same realm, it can only be honestly to die, let alone confront it. Regarding this, Xu Yang, who was naturally aloof, had no doubts, so he went directly to Jian Wushuang. This is also the realm of evolving immortals, even the enemy's evolving immortals, but now it gives him a great sense of security. This is the home of this seat. This seat is the eternal way of heaven. No one can hit me hard. Now, with a pious belief become my nourishment, you are enough to make me break through again. As the voice of Yu Yin resounded in this abyss dojo, the huge futon composed of dead immortals also moved at this moment. Every dead fairy wailed in pain, as if they had suffered the most painful punishment before they fell completely. Endless death aura escaped in the center of this dojo, and then the huge futon moved, and all the dead immortals opened their blood-red eyes. Chapter 4907. Dead immortals are not enough to be fearful. They are not even tricky to develop immortals in the same state. Because in the final analysis, they are just the scum left by union swallowing the fairy source, and they are slaves without any perception. But the power of the futon, made up of so many dead immortals, should not be underestimated. They wailed together. But Jian Wushuang still hasn't passed that hurdle after all. Jian Wushuang. When Xu Yang saw the scene, an infinite force of suction converged from the four wilds, and then he quickly recovered his everything madly. Holding a silver spear directly felt a little discomfort. This huge dead fairy futon is really a bit tricky. To stop me, and he immediately looked at him coldly. Ancestral technique Xu Yang to deal snorted with it. Coldly. The ancestral technique, remember, the heavenly gate fighting is extremely sacred realm. The vast expanse of power burst out. Can you control the gods flew out from the heavenly gate, eagle dog under one after another, young master descending infinite dare you to teach the seat? At this moment, Yu Yin shouted all sharply, the dead immortals in the dead immortal futon raised their heads, and the infinite pressure and then swept opened over. Their mouths to devour Xu Yang gritted his teeth. Ling Jian resisting was a little surprised. Firmly. This type of heavenly gate was so frightening that it was completely swallowed. Don't go too far. At this point, what if the seat is the dead immortal futon was already extremely large? This seat will kill you wailed at him again. And young Master Huang's complexion changed drastically. Yu Yin smiled, and he had already prepared to fight to the death. Behind. However, the hatred in Jian Wushuang's eyes took a step ahead of him. Then look at how you scumbag hurt the seat. The invisible sword in his hand broke out in the air again. But it was in the next moment. Yu Yin is like a cat catching a mouse, illuminates the entire dojo under the abyss. The insurmountable gap between Dianxian and only the sword was left in Jian Wushuang's calm eyes. Jian Wushuang collided. There was no shocking scene, and the immortal was not even any loud recovering quickly. This unremarkable sword is an absolute. He gritted his teeth. The strongest one. The broken fairy body began to give birth to granulation. The dead fairy futon, right here, which was originally full of extremes, but abrupt voice sounded from behind him. Countless pieces of limbs. He can't
Under
be
the
killed
sword,
at all.
the dead fairy
Jian
futon
Wuxuang
turned his head abruptly.
Xu Yangyuan
and saw
opened
a
his
dead
eyes
fairy with
and
only
looked
his
at
head
Jian
crawling
Wuxuang's
towards
back in
him.
disbelief.
Don't worry,
A big question
difference
was
from
born
them.
in his heart.
I haven't completely
the same
died
as
yet.
Yanxian.
I have
Why
the
is
last
the difference
bit of
so big?
consciousness. After
The
beheading
head
the
of
dead
this
immortal
dead
fairy
futon.
is indeed different.
Jian Wuxuang
and
went
there are a
straight to
pair of
Fengshan
crystal
unabated.
eyes in the socket.
He wanted to save him.
I was one of the top
However, the
repairers
sudden
who had been
change,
tricked by
the
him
ghost
to come
cloud
here
that
had
earlier
disappeared. Now they are
quietly
all dead,
appeared at
but
this
I am
moment.
still alive. Looking at Jian
The reason
Wuxuang
why
with
I
a
still
smile.
have the last
Get
trace
away.
of faith in living,
He shouted sharply,
is because I have to
and the
inform
long
the
sword
strong
in his hand
who can
slashed
kill him
directly
about
towards
his
Yu Yin.
weaknesses.
Wow!
Fortunately, I have
Under
waited.
the sword,
The
Yu
head of
Yin's
this
figure
dead
shattered
immortal
directly
came to Jian
and then
Wuxuang's
turned into
face.
two.
His eyes
Fool,
overflowing with
you are just a
expression.
trivial immortal.
What I know is that
you
he
want
does
to
not
kill
have
me
a
in my
body,
heaven in vain,
but is in a ghost
Jian
state.
Wuxuang ignored
and all
him
the offensives
and
of the
continued
immortal
to slash.
against him can't
With each of
completely
his
kill him.
slashes, Yu Yin's
But I know
figure
him
would
completely.
shatter.
I
But
have been
another one would
enslaved by
fissure
him,
soon afterwards.
and I know his biggest
and
secret.
soon there were nearly
He
100
doesn't have a
Yu-Yin
body,
surrounding Jian
but it is a
Wuxuang.
phantom of a
Danger
thing.
run.
I once saw
Seeing
him
this
take out an
scene,
ancient
Xu
book,
Yang reminded
but
in
now I
shock.
think it must be his
However,
origin.
it was too late.
If you can find
Nearly
that
100
ancient
Yu-Yin
book,
all grinned
you can
and
completely
opened their
destroy
palms,
him,
making a
Jian
fatal
Wuxuang
blow.
looked at him
That
and
was a
asked
full
after
blow
a
from
moment,
Dian Immortal.
"Where is that ancient
and the
book?"
infinite beam of
Under
death
this
energy
dojo,
blasted
it
Jian
depends on
Wuxuang
whether you
from
have
all
destroyed the
directions at
abilities
this moment.
here.
Boom!
The head slowly
The entire
said,
Earth's
"Can you
abyss was
do it?"
completely turbulent, and even Xu Yang
Chapter
couldn't stand firm
4908.
here.
The
Only
immortal
barely
body
blew
has
himself up.
completely
This
recovered,
slaying lasted
and the
for
heavy
a long
damage
time
that Yin can
until
inflict
everything
on
was
him
calm.
is extremely
Then,
limited
a body
after
riddled
all.
with holes fell
Even
from
far
the air
from the
and
usual.
knelt on the ground.
So Jian
Divine
Wuxuang
blood,
recovered quickly,
like a stream,
after listening
flowed
to the
out of
death
the broken
fairy's
body.
head.
Jian
and
Wuxuang
infiltrated
said
a
again,
large area of
"Can
land.
you tell me the specific
At this moment,
location?"
Jian Wuxuang,
Of course, that
the
ancient
immortal
book should be
body
under
were
you.
all shattered
I hope
to the
you can
extreme.
destroy it. If he
This
went
is the
further,
last thing I can tell.
I am afraid that all
The
his
dead
immortal
fairies
bodies
had
would be
gradually
broken.
collapsed.
After
and
all,
finally turned
he was
into
still
a handful
careless,
of fly
still
ash
underestimating
disappearing.
Jian
Jian
Wuxuang
Wuxuang
slowly got up.
Even if
he watched
Yin
the
is
scene in the
unbearable,
air.
He is
and
a
then
true
condensed
Dian
an
immortal,
invisible sword
able
in his
to easily
palm.
give Jian
The
Wu
next
double
moment,
wounds.
he drew a sword towards the ground. Boom! The collapse from the depths of the earth resounded. With a sword 1,000,000 feet, the entire Earth's core under the abyss was dug off by his sword. Yu Yin, who was about to slap Xu Yang with a palm, changed his face, and the next moment he went straight to Jian Wuxuang. "Want to leave? I will never make you feel better, even if you die today." Xu Yang was covered in blood, holding a silver spear in front of Yu Yin. "Trash things, you can't help yourself." Yu Yin was furious, and slapped him away directly. But then, a tall figure resembling a peak stopped in front of him again, spitting fiercely. "Old beast, there is also the level of Grandpa." Yu Yin was almost mad, facing Fengshan, directly releasing endless life. Fengshan and Xu Yang only blocked his dozens of breath time. But it was the dozens of breath time that Jian Wuxuang had won. Jian Wuxuang almost dug the entire center of the earth, and under the deep and cold earth pole, a red light suddenly swept up, shining the entire Dyuan dojo. Yu Yun's face was like dead ashes, and instantly rushed to the red light. However, it was too late. Jian Wuxuang reached out his hand into the red light, and took out something. "No, do not want." He was terrified, but he dared not take a step forward. When the red light dissipated completely, a dilapidated ancient book fell into Jian Wuxuang's hands. Reverse the Death Sutra. On this whole ancient book, there are only these 4 weird and curious fonts. Besides, there is nothing else. "Give it back to me and I will let you go." Yu Yin shouted in horror. Jian Wuxuang ignored him, and opened the first page of the ancient book in his hand. The red light circulates, and the picture of an ugly ghost engraved on each page of the painting comes into view. "Yin? Ghost? Could he be the ghost on the first page?" he thought. However, Yu Yin couldn't wait any longer. He directly rushed towards Jian Wuxuang. Jian Wuxuang didn't hesitate anymore. He reached out his hand, and tore off the first page of the Death Sutra. "Damn you!" Yu Yin was completely desperate, and his whole figure was instantly broken and clean, leaving no trace. At the same time, the endless death energy began to dissipate, and the entire Dyuan dojo began to collapse. Yu Yin's sudden death on the spot is simply unthinkable to the extreme. Everything happened so fast that even Jian Wuxuang couldn't believe it. He just tore off the first page of this backward Death Sutra. And a Dian immortal died like this? Jian Wuxuang quickly recovered, looking at the page that was torn off by himself, only to realize that it had become a piece of yellow paper. Everything reversed too quickly, Yuyan died suddenly on the spot, and the lifeless energy that supported this Diyuan Daochang also dissipated, and could no longer stay in Diyuan for a long time. Before he could think about what had happened, Jian Wushuang directly stuffed the ancient book into his arms, and then urged Fengshan to leave. "My lord, what should this guy do?" Fengshan wiped the nosebleed off his face, and pointed to the almost non-human-shaped sun on the ground. Jian Wushuang did not speak. Saving this guy is equivalent to saving an enemy. But he didn't hesitate too much. He directly released Yanli to wrap it up, and then soared out of the abyss together. The endless death aura has dissipated, and the originally chaotic sky has returned to its original color. It's just that the earth is still yellow and dry, and it may take a long time to recover. As a Dangxian's dojo, this heaven is covered with bones, and countless Dingxiao and Yinxian have fallen here. Jian Wushuang originally intended to destroy this heaven directly, but after thinking about it, he didn't do anything. Yuyan has completely fallen, and there is no possibility of recovery. The energy contained in the Reverse Death Sutra is probably beyond imagination. Jian Wushuang didn't intend to study it immediately. He still had more important things to do. Standing on the sky, the sun at this moment has almost recovered. Facing Jian Wushuang, he arched his hands heavily. "Thank you for your life-saving grace. Xu Yang will not forget." Jian Wushuang waved his hand. "How is your recovery?" Xu Yang said, "It's not bad, already has the power to protect itself. Can you return to your own heaven?" Hearing this, Xu Yang didn't answer, and only said after a while, "Su Yang has been defeated, and he no longer has the face to attack the six-day realm. He will immediately return to his own heaven, and no longer set foot for 6 days. But before that, I will return to the six-day realm with you once, recall my subordinates, Yan Xian, and no longer participate in this war." Jian Wushuang looked at him, somewhat puzzled. Xu Yang smiled bitterly. "The reason why I did this is actually to redeem some losses. I now understand a little bit. With you, the six-day realm will be hard to be destroyed." Hearing the words, he nodded. "Yes, after you follow me to the battlefield, the subordinates will be recalled and leave immediately. I will not stop them." Xu Yang nodded, and then as if he had made some kind of decision, he asked tentatively, "Can you tell me your name?" After blurting out this sentence, Xu Yang soon regretted it. You must know that the relationship between them is the enemy. Yuwu, a Khonshu. Calm is simply a manifestation of ulterior motives. But Jian Wushuang didn't care about it. "Just call me Wushuang, this is my name." Fog Shuang. Xu Yang repeated it in his heart, then solemnly arched his hands. "Brother Wu, I've written it down. If we meet again in the future, I will definitely invite you to swig." Jian Wushuang waved his hand again. "I don't have to drink it. I just hope to see you next time, not on the battlefield." Fengshan on the side grinned. "Even if we meet on the battlefield, I won't be able to meet each other on the battlefield. Then I will be in front of the adults and beat you down." Xu Yang smiled bitterly. No one knew where they would meet next time. Maybe it was really on the battlefield. Being involuntary is a true portrayal of being a great official. It has been a long time since Jian Wushuang was dragged into the fairy formation by Yuyan and strayed into this heaven. The most urgent thing right now is to return to the six-day battlefield to turn the tide. Chapter 4909. The entire void battlefield has been completely chaotic, and the war has spread to a large area of the sky except the six-day realm. Nearly 100 heavens have been destroyed in this battle. The boundless void is shattered, and Yanli mixed with the violent wind forward, has almost stretched out his hand to directly hold Xiao Daijin's neck. At this moment, and lifted him up. The last two celestial formations were completely opened. The playful voice sounded from under the black robe, 800 immortals besieged them. And then the hood was slowly pulled down. Even Void couldn't bear the impact of so many immortals. And this extremely old Dian immortal had no need to clean his face, crazy to the extreme, and his eyes were muddy. But what can be seen is that these more than 800 immortals without any expression all gathered in front of the six-day realm portal. "When you are dying, no matter how hard it is to advance, Only
It
you are
seems that
worthy
they
to
are
kill
caught
me.
in a fierce
Do you
battle.
dare to kill me?
Immortal evolving in
Xiaodaijin
batches
gave
of
a dark
topper
smile,
pears,
his
continued
eyes
to
full of
fall.
madness.
And the
Bones
bones
of
of
immortals
why don't you
flowed
dare?
miserably in the void.
He also smiled,
and then were crushed.
and his empty right
in this
hand suddenly
catastrophe
released
battle,
its power.
there is the most
which
dazzling
directly
figure.
blasted on Xiao
He has 10
Daijin's
wings
fairy
on his
body.
back.
The immortal
and the color
body
of each
shattered,
wing is different,
and the blood spewed
releasing
out,
a terrible
and a
general
hideous
trend.
wound was directly
Every time he
blasted
shot
into his belly.
He smashed
Hurry
the
up,
Yanxian who dared
old
to
dog,
go ahead into
you will
powder.
do it again.
And the
I will
entire
see if you have
six-day
the
realm
courage
was
to do
almost
it again.
protected by his own
There
power.
was no pain on
By
Xiao
his side,
Daijin's face.
there were
but he
fewer than
smiled
20
grimly.
Yanxians left.
You don't kill me
With 20
today.
to
I
800,
will call
this
you
is
later.
unimaginable.
You have no way
Gong
to survive,
Ziqian was
no way
also
to die.
forced to join this
The
battle.
old Dainxian
and
turned
almost
his
all of the
turbid eyes
100
to look at him.
Yanxians he brought with him
You can't
died.
die now.
He was stuck
and
in
you
this
need
battle
all the dust to
and
settle.
couldn't get out of it.
Then I will come to
At
kill
this
you
moment,
myself.
he almost wanted
After
to slap
saying
his
this,
previous self
he directly
fiercely.
reached out.
He thought
and
he
threw
made
his
this
down
decision
into the void.
wisely. And then
But he
his
didn't
body
know that he was
disappeared.
heading for a
The
dead
battle
end.
continued.
If it hadn't
and more
been
than
for the last
800
line of
immortal
defense,
evangelists and
which was the
countless top
protection of the
repairers,
truth,
had already
I'm afraid
wiped
they
out
would
the
have
remaining
fallen for
forces
hundreds
in
of
the
times.
six-day realm.
There are only
Even
less
the
than
truth
20
is clear.
eternal immortals
It is
left.
no longer able to
Chuanqiu,
turn the tide.
Qingqing,
Together they are
Jing,
powerless.
Zhao Ting.
However,
Wei Liujia
Dijing
and others
clenched
are
his
already
teeth.
at the end of
His
the battle.
power of generative
If they
power
continue
was
to
about
fight
to dry
like
up.
this, they will
And when
only
faced
have one
with the
end.
encirclement of
All
more than
destroyed.
800 fairy
There are more than 800
I am
immortals,
afraid that he might
which is
lose
really
another
terrible.
true life.
You must know that
Wuxia,
even the
where
most
did you
common
go?
immortals
His
have the
voice
ability
quickly
to
spread
destroy
to
the
Qingqing's
heavens.
ears.
They are all above the
Qingqing,
heavens,
who came back
and they
from
can even
Jian
forge the
Wuxuang,
existence
immediately
of the
said,
heavens.
Brother
Right
Jian
now
is
they
going
are
to
gathered
destroy
here,
the immortal
and no one
formation.
can stop them.
But now it looks
Daiking's
like
life was damaged.
I am afraid that
and
something
he used
has
his
happened.
own strength to resist
Impossible.
the offensive of
Brother
the
Jian
800
will be
Yanxian.
fine.
He will be back
Almost
soon.
making him a little unable to
Chunqiu was
support
bloodied,
it.
but
his
his
tone
tone
was
persisted,
extremely firm,
persisting
a
until
moment
that
is a
figure
moment,
appeared.
and I will
few
wait
of us,
until
let's
Brother
go, the
Jian comes
six-day
back.
realm is no longer
Jing
preserved.
gritted his teeth
Gong
and said,
Ziqian looked at
he has
Dijing
only entered
and
the
said
realm
in
of
a troubled
immortals.
voice.
His foundation
Dijing
is the
coldly
most
glanced
shallow.
at him,
But he
and then
still
continued
continues
to lower his
Dijing
unparalleled
didn't
momentum.
say much anymore.
After
He
swallowing
also
his
believed
throat,
that Jian
young
Wuxuang would
Master
return
Chen
soon.
didn't dare to speak
And the
anymore.
reason why he
He
persisted
could feel the
until now
killing
was
intent
also
in
waiting for
Dijing's
Jian
eyes.
Wuxuang.
And he didn't
shook
care
the
about
10
the
wings
identity
behind
of his
him
emperor.
and lowered layers
Thinking
of
of
golden
this,
light.
he gritted his
Anyone
teeth
who
and
approached
fought
him
hard
would
again.
suffer severe
With
damage.
Jian Wuxuang's
Even if it was a
disappearance,
fairy,
the entire
now,
battlefield
it
has
is
reached the
gradually
most
fading.
chaotic and
Just when
disorderly
Dijing
state.
was about to
The
call
little
out the
emperor
treasure,
stood in the void
a
in
strong
despair.
premonition
He has
suddenly
been
rose
besieged
deep
by
in his
nearly
heart.
100 Yanxian.
Being
And it
able
is
to walk
difficult
out
to
of the
escape.
era when
But
Zhen
the
Wuyang
immortals who
became the
besieged
emperor,
him,
his
no one
divine
dared to step
consciousness
forward,
has been so
hesitating
powerful
in their eyes.
that he can feel the
Every
danger
immortal
coming
who came
from
to
any
this six-day
direction.
realm knew.
At the next
who
moment,
this young man dressed in
Dijing did not
luxurious
hesitate,
clothes,
with
he
a
directly
handsome and
released
gloomy
all
face
his power.
Because
And the
of
10
this,
wings behind
no
his
one
back
dared to
also
step
closed
forward.
at the same time.
After all,
protecting
he is
his
the
fairy
emperor's
body
son
for the
under
first
the seat of
time.
Zhen Wuyang. Holding a soft sword in his hand, his gaze slowly swept across all the immortals in front of him, as if he wanted to write them down. At this moment, the void in front of him quietly curled up with layers of ripples. And then a black robe appeared suddenly. As soon as this black robe appeared, an aura that was too strong to be inspected escaped. Chapter 49:10. The void shook suddenly. All Yanxian and Ding Xiu felt the void suddenly sticky at this moment. It's like time has stagnated for a moment. Then, a black light that could tear the void through the entire void battlefield at an unimaginable speed fiercely shot at the magnificent figure. As the heavens collapsed, the day withered. An extremely crisp cry resounded in the void battlefield. Daiking's treasures shattered directly, countless golden lights retreated from his immortal body, and the magnificent 10-party wings withered and shattered. All the immortals can be clearly seen, replaced by a huge wound at the heart of Diqing immortal body. The ultimate pure golden blood gurgled out, and even the broken void was stained with color. Gongziqian, Chen Qing, Chuanxiu, Cui Jing, Weiliujia, Zhao Ting and others were all face ashes at this moment. And even the few remaining eternal immortals, and the few thousand Dingxiu were desperate. Every immortal Yan, and even Dingxiu knew that the reason why they were able to persist until now was because they had a clear existence. Right now, Diqing was hit hard, and everything finally came to an end. Ahem. He coughed out a ray of golden blood. Diqing breathed and languid. His eyes began to tire. And then he could no longer hold it, and fell into the void. Chen Qiu was the first to react. He came to Diqing in an instant, supported it, and took out a handful of Emperor Pin pills directly from his arms with one hand, and put them directly into Diqing's mouth. Don't resist, eat them all. Chuanxiu said with a trembling voice. The entrance of the D-Pin pill was directly transformed into a ray of light, which penetrated into his body, and began to quickly repair the severely injured place. Diqing, who had almost died, was able to continue his life, and his aura calmed down, but he was still in a state of uncertainty, and it seemed that he could die at any time. The shattered void battlefield fell silent, and more than 800 immortals walked towards them silently like mountains and seas about to fall. The unspeakable aura almost left the six-day realm on the verge of collapse. Immediately afterwards, an old black-robed figure appeared in front of the army of immortals who covered the sky. He walked slowly, satisfaction in his muddy eyes. The old man didn't expect that in this small void battlefield, there is actually a 9-ranked Dayan immortal. What made the old man not even expecting was that the old man beheaded and killed a rank 9 Dayan immortal with his own power. When he said this, his muddy eyes were full of arrogance. This is indeed a kind of glory. He is only a mere rank 3 Dayan immortal, and he was able to kill a rank 9 Dayan immortal. This incident will be his most glorious battle. Chen Qing took a step forward slowly, looking at him with a gloomy expression. A shameless person would actually do a sneak attack. Although you are a Dayan, you are not as good as a beast. Hearing the words, the old Mai Taiyan flicked his fingers directly. In an instant, Chen Qing's complexion changed, and his right arm holding the sword was directly crushed into powder. You are a little Yanxian, dare to clamor with this seat? No respect. He hummed coldly. Cui Jing stood up at the right time, and looked at him proudly. The words were full of disdain. I say something bad. You are only worthy of sneak attack. If you put it on the open face to fight, you can't get on the table at all. I don't know how many Huanyan old people who have not been angry. This time they are completely angry. He didn't expect that these ants-like guys would dare to swear against him. How he was not ashamed. Looking for death. Old Maid Dayan directly flicked his fingers. Cui Jing was hit hard, and the Kikyo's blood was gushing at the same time. Today, you have one count. None of you can live. After he finished speaking, he clicked with his fingers and Chuanxiu, Zhao Ting, Wei Liujia and others were all hit hard. The only Yanxian in the 6-day realm. At this moment, no one can get up. Daangxian's suppression of Yanxian was really terrible. He just moved his fingers and caused Yanxian to be hit hard. No Yanxian can stand up, and the door to the 6-day realm is wide open. Old Maid Dayan had contempt in his eyes, and at the same time cast his gaze forward. He only needs to destroy all the 6-day realm, and the task is completed. Just as he was about to destroy for 6 days, the sudden change occurred. Facing the army of immortals leaning like mountains and seas, a thin Dingxiu stepped out, then drew out the real sword hanging from his waist, and looked forward solemnly. Seeing such a scene, all Yanxians felt ridiculous. and even the old Diancian was astonished to the extreme. This is even a top repairer, who has just reached the stage of entering yen, dare to stop nearly 1,000 of yensian? You know, it is as simple as crushing an ant to kill a yensian at random. But he still did not dodge, and stood up resolutely, holding the hilt in both hands, the sharp blade pointed forward. This ordinary-looking, thin-shaped dingxio is Su Jin. Seeing this ridiculous scene, the old Dian immortal seemed to be in interest, and he waved his hand directly, and suddenly the 3 top repairers, who were also entering yen, flew out and stood in front of Su Jin. Su Jin took a deep breath, then stepped forward with a sword. 1 top repair and 3 top repairs. This is almost a suspenseless ending. But Su Jin stood alone and resolutely stood up. He was unable to retreat, and at the same time he knew his fate. In the next moment, the 3 dingxio set off at the same time, and several powerful training bursts from their hands, and then violently shot forward. The long sword pointed forward. Su Jin seemed to have entered a certain ethereal state, and even her breath disappeared. All Yangtzeans watched this farce-like scene jokingly, but the expected result did not appear. Combining the strength of the 3 top repairs, when hitting the target, it actually broke every inch. A careful Xianxian noticed that the violent force training was not broken by itself, but was shattered by dense sword intent. That sword repair is not easy. The 3 dingxio also noticed this change. Calm, but none of them took it seriously, and they all rushed towards Su Jin. The entire spectrum of Luoyan grass sword style is composed of 9 styles, ranging from simple to complex. So far, only Jian Wushuang has cultivated to the ultimate, and Su Jin, who is dull and extremely poor in control of Yanli, has only practiced the 3rd style so far. How powerful can the 3-style Luoyan grass sword be? At this moment, Su Jin had long forgotten all the crises. He had only the sword in his eyes, and at the same time, he deduced kendo over and over again in his divine consciousness. Luoyan grass sword 1st style, Shuxing. This is the most basic sword that lays the sword intent of Luoyan Chaojian in the whole spectrum, starting from simple to complex. True sword probing. The simplest cross-cut is the meaning of staring. Void fluctuations, sword intent is brilliant. Chapter 49:11. The three top repairers who flew past felt bad at the same time. They backed away in a hurry, but they were still half a step late. Laugh. The sound resounded like tearing brocade and silk, and the void was opened with a long and narrow gap. The three backing Dingxiu all looked at him solemnly. At this moment, on the same place on their cheeks, there was a scarlet blood line, and blood dripping from the wound. An ordinary cross cut, causing all three Dingxiu to suffer. They all felt the palpitations of the sword intent, but they still couldn't avoid it. If they didn't stop in time, the consequences would not end there. Fucking, you are looking for death. One of the youngest, Dingxiu, was furious and rushed directly with a touch of blood on his face. Su Jin raised his brows and faced this surging top repair. He had no fear. Flowing cloudgrass sword, the second style. Consecutive months. The true sword slashed straight, and riding on the remaining power of the star restraint, the coldest sword burst out. That Dingxiu smiled sullenly, as if he had been prepared. His arms shook, and he directly covered a layer of force barrier around his body to deal with it. The next moment the two collided, and Su Jin, who was thin, flew upside down, and even the real sword in his hand almost fell off. The Dingxiu stood frozen in place, laughing loudly. Cough cough. Su Jin slowly straightened up, wiped the blood from the corner of her mouth, and looked at him calmly. When a shocking scene appeared, Dingxiu, who was still laughing out loud, suddenly shut up, his expression dignified, and he looked at his heart in disbelief. I saw that his heart was penetrated by a sword, and his origin turned into a mottled star, which quickly overflowed. No, it's impossible. How could my origin be damaged? He was terrified, and then fell completely. All this happened in an instant, and it was just a single fight that eliminated a top repair of the same realm. With such combat power, there is no top repair to underestimate. The remaining two top shaves were extremely dignified, and it was obvious that their companions had fallen, giving them a great deal of pressure. The two looked at each other, then acted at the same time, and flew directly towards Su Jin, bursting out their strongest blow. The void oscillates, and the two majestic forces reach. Su Jin took a deep breath again. With the second form of the flowing cloud grass sword, he killed a top repairer at the same level, and the third form that was not yet proficient would probably not be able to perform to the extreme. Although he thought so, he still released the third formula. Go to the water. The third style of going to the water is actually a style that combines the two styles of sword intent, and uses them. Although it seems simple, it is introverted. And if you are not thoroughly familiar with the first two styles of sword intent, you can't play at all. As soon as the sword intent came to the water, the entire void centered on Su Jin seemed to become a flood of spring water. The two top repairers who had gone all out, when they stepped into this place, they were like drowning, and they were suddenly tied to them, and they couldn't even release their strength. It was in this short instant that Su Jin was so small and thin that he was holding a real sword, like a heaven in charge of judgment, and harvested it. The void is silent. At this moment, all the top repairers who saw this scene, even the fairy cultivating, are all bright. Even the old Dian immortal with muddy eyes looked at Su Jin at the right time. Nothing else, because this sword is simple and clear, but it is amazing to the extreme, so that all viewers have the heart to learn. The origins were shattered one after another, and the two top repairers who were bound by the sword of going to the water had all no life at this time, like a stone statue, sinking into the abyss of void. Su Jin retracted the long sword soaked in blood, and he gasped for breath. Obviously, after completely releasing these three sword intents, he no longer has the power to fight. But even so, his expression is still peaceful, as if he doesn't care about everything. 3 swords killed 3 Dingxiu in the same realm. He was already very satisfied, and at the same time recalled the figure of the draped clothes in his divine consciousness. I'm afraid that from then on, he will no longer be able to comprehend the exquisiteness of the flowing cloud and grass sword style in the second half of the spectrum. Even the gang wind fell silent in the void silent. Immediately afterwards, the voice of the old Dian immortal sounded. The junior, tell me the kendo you are practicing, and I will let you make a living and let you practice under my seat, how about? As soon as these words came out, all the fairy cultivators were in an uproar. And if a third-ranked great elder fairy favored him, his path of cultivation in the future would be extremely bright. This is just a guy who is a top repairer. If he can, breaking through the immortal is just around the corner. And for a while many immortals are hot. Su Jin laughed. He seemed extremely happy, and his clear voice resounded in the void. However, in the next moment, he returned to normal, with a bit of disdain in his clear eyes. Only you are worthy? All the immortals are sluggish. Can't believe that a small top repairer will give up such a generous condition, and even speak insults to the immortal. Just when all Yinxian thought that the old Dianxian would be furious, he didn't expect him to have any expressions, as if the insult was not that. Since you don't want to tell the kendo that you are practicing, the old man is not reluctant. You tell me the name of the creator of the kendo. How about the old man also letting you make a living? The old maid Yinxian spoke slowly with a soft tone. Su Jin smiled coldly, glanced at him obliquely, and directly retracted the real sword in his sheath. My master's name taboo, pass to your ears. It is dirty, my master's name taboo. Even if the disciple is stupid, he will never do such a thing. He is ready to die calmly, not waiting for the old Dian immortal to get angry. A voice like coming from above the 9 heavens rang out. Since you want to know my name so much, why don't I tell you and listen to it myself? All the immortals are horrified. They all look behind them like an enemy. I saw the silent shattered void, a figure dressed as a black ranger walking slowly. There was an incomparable divine pattern flowing all over his body, exuding an indescribable momentum that made Yinxian unable to look directly at him. And behind him, 2 figures followed closely. One of the bald giants, who was as strong as a sacred peak, was gearing up, as if only waiting for a command, then let go. The other figure is holding a silver spear, full of arrogance, full of invincible aura. All Yinxian watched this scene with bated breath. Yes, it's Jintian official. In the 6-day realm, the few immortals left behind shouted at the same time, their eyes all flushed. Sword Heaven official. Jin Heaven official. At this moment, all the top repairs left in the 6-day realm screamed spontaneously. Chapter 49:12. That's a reaction that will only appear after the desperate situation has returned to life. Chun Xiu held his palm tightly, already unable to restrain the excitement in his heart. Big Brother Jian, it is Big Brother Jian who is back. Cui Jing vigorously raised his arms and shouted excitedly. Wei Liujia let out a sigh of relief, only to feel that the hideous wounds on his body no longer hurt. Young Master Qian, who had been waiting for an opportunity to escape, saw this scene, and his heart was inexplicably settled. But he was still ready to escape, because he didn't think that a little fairy would be able to save this defeat. The young man holding the true sword in front of the six-day realm, the disdain and coldness in his eyes disappeared at this moment, replaced by respect and expectation. Seeing this scene, the old Dayan immortal, who was still a little surprised, suddenly sneered. Such a small fairy goddess is just something that can be crushed to death at hand. Now that rank 9 Dayan immortal sheltering the six-day realm was killed by him, he believed that there was no other immortal on the entire battlefield that could resist. Thinking of this, he lazily stretched out a finger and gave orders. Crush them. Only this time, a considerable part of Yanxian did not leave, all looking at each other, because they noticed that their great heavenly official was actually standing behind the mysterious figure at this moment. Why don't you do it yet? Old Maid Dayan said angrily. His voice seemed to tear the void again. But then, among the more than 800 fairy tales, there are nearly 300 fairy tales at this moment, all looking forward, solemnly nodding. Behind Jian Wushuang, the Shuyang, wearing a flowing cloud silver armor and holding a silver gun, took a step forward and said in a condensed voice, "Anyone who listens to my son will leave the battlefield immediately." The sound moved in the void, and ripples were shocked. After hearing this order, the 300 Yanxians rushed towards Shuyang without hesitation. Suddenly, there were only more than 400 left of the mighty army of immortals, nearly half of it. Shuyang, you wantonly. The old maid Dayan was furious. In his opinion, Shuyang was still just an ant. Since it is an ant, on this battlefield he must obey him. But right now, at a critical point, Shuyang unexpectedly withdrew his troops temporarily. How could this not make him angry? Shuyang glanced at him calmly, and then said loudly, "The urgent order is here, and I have to leave. I want to accompany you in this battle." Hearing this, the old man Dayan was so angry that he couldn't add to his anger. "I see you dare to go?" After he finished speaking, he directly waved his arms, and suddenly the Yanli Guanghua burst out of his palm like a chain, and went straight to those Yanxian bundles. The next moment, the sudden change occurred. Jian Wushuang's figure quietly blocked the retreating Yanxian, and then he pointed out. In an instant, a million strands of Huagong burst into existence, and violently collided. The two collided, and the shattered void was once again torn into an abyss. The extremely magnificent Yanli light illuminates the entire void, and Yanxian, who is a little closer, retreats thousands of feet. Old Maid Dayanxian's cloudy eyes stared to the fullest at this moment. He couldn't believe that a small Yanxian could withstand his angry blow. After Hua Meng dispersed, Jian Wushuang, who had not damaged the corners of his clothes, glanced at him calmly, then turned to look at Shuyang. Shuyang took a deep breath and solemnly arched his hand in front of him. "Brother Wu, treasure." After he finished speaking, he took more than 300 Yanxian straight to the immortal formation, and soon disappeared. At this point, there were only more than 400 Yanxian, and one rank 3 Dayanxian, left on the entire void battlefield. On the battlefield, a large area was suddenly vacated, and Yanxian and Ding Xiu, who had survived in the six-day realm, were secretly relieved. The originally restless Sun Qian calmed down and looked at Jian Wushuang with doubts in his eyes. He didn't understand. With the appearance of that guy, the war seemed to be reversing? No, it's impossible. A mere fairy wants to reverse the situation? It's just nonsense. Gong Ziqian shook his head in denial, and then he seemed to think of something. His eyes widened suddenly, full of shock. Then he hurriedly approached Chen Qing, who was closest to him, and asked nervously, "Your Sword Heaven official, is that the Sword Heaven official who killed Chang dueling with his own power?" Chen Qing glanced at him, unconsciously lifted the jade belt around his waist, and said arrogantly, "That is what a small one is often more than one order. Then you are optimistic about how Jian Tingguan can turn the tide." Young Master Qian slowly spit out a murky breath, and he also began to faintly look forward to it. What kind of monster it is to be able to shake Dian Immortals, Sword Heaven official, with the power of immortality. The void changed from turbulence back to dead silence, and all Yinxian stared at Jian Wushuang. But Jian Wushuang's gaze crossed them, staring at the old Dian Immortal. The familiar scene seems to have begun again. The battle with Chang dueling was also in this scene. The only thing that changed was that the old Dian Immortal now seemed to have been immersed in the third turn Dian Immortal for a long time. Its unfathomable extent seems to be much deeper than Chang dueling. A battle with him is inevitable, and Jian Wushuang has already felt it tricky. Here is another guy who is going to die. No matter what, this seat will completely slaughter the six-day realm today to realize the future troubles. The old Taiyangxian said in a deep voice, and at the same time a scepter was condensed in his palm, and he slapped the void hard. All the gods will be obliterated for 6 days, and no one will be left. The Yinxian army seemed to be impatient for a long time, and after getting the order, they hurried to the 6-day realm. At this moment, Jian Wushuang's cold voice resounded. "Those who don't want to die, go back on the same path now." After he finished his words, a number of sword and tent suddenly appeared in his hand, and he swept forward. Several of the fastest Yangxians were crushed directly into Xianyuan and turned into powder. But this is not enough to stop the Yinxian army, nearly 400 Yinxian, at this moment, like a dark cloud covering the sky and the sun, descending for 6 days. Looking back at the heavy wounds behind him, Diqing and the others, who was already hard to fight, raised his eyebrows slightly, and then he took a step forward resolutely. He was alone facing the army of immortals, every immortal in the 6 heavens realm. Every Ding Xiu just held his palm at this moment. With one's own strength, can you really resist this blow like a mountain and sea? The next moment, the solitary Jian Wushuang, his whole body suddenly increased with divine marks, and his whole figure was like composed of hundreds of millions of sword intent, brilliant and magnificent to the extreme. The entire void began to vibrate violently. After seeing this scene, Yinxian who participated in that battle was all shocked and excited to the point of indescribable. Chapter 49:13. It was a sword that was simply incomprehensible, and a sword that could not be stopped. It is a sword that can destroy the heavens, and that no immortal can contend. The power that the sword exudes even gave all Yinxian who participated in that battle an illusion. Even the emperor, under that sword, I am afraid it is difficult to retreat. That sword was so shocking and horrible that it made Jitiang Xianjin often make despair to die. He even became the deepest nightmare in every Yangxian's heart that finally escaped the battlefield. A sword that has surpassed the cognition of every Yinxian, even Dianxian, will come again. Wushuang Kendo, Zingehuhe Jianini 3rd style. Lake. This is the most prosperous sword, and its birth far exceeded Jian Wushuang's expectations. There is not even any frame that can completely restrain it, including the entire Wushuang Kendo, because of this sword intent, and has reached a certain insurmountable height. A heavenly gate that made the emptiness of hundreds of thousands of miles completely cleared slowly appeared. This can no longer be described by the magnificent fairy trails. Even the radiant power exuded by the Dian Immortal, under this heavenly gate, is like a firefly's and a bright moon competing for glory. This magnificent heavenly gate is made of infinite and endless sword intent, pure and incomparable. In the next moment, the heavenly gate that seemed to have sealed up countless years slowly opened, and a quiet lake that seemed to have sealed the years flowed out of it. Jian Wushuang held the invisible sword, his clothes fluttered, and he stepped into the door of the day. The lake flows in the void, like a clear spring, where the sun, moon and stars are all born. All the immortals who saw this scene were horrified. Even if they were crazy and desperate, they felt the terrifying breath. Even the old maid Dian Immortal on the outermost periphery suddenly opened his eyes at this moment, and only horror and disbelief remained in his muddy eyes. Even he has no idea what language to describe this sword. The glorious light in the Tianmen is extremely radiant, like when a big sun blooms, a true shadow emerges from it. That was the true shadow cast by the pure sword intent, and his sword intent was so brilliant that it eclipsed everything. He led the sword with his hand, and came from the heavenly gate. Even the way of heaven is creeping underfoot. This sword even exceeded the cognition of the old Dianxian. This is supposed to be a sword of Xingyi, but will it be embodied? At this moment when the light was at its peak, the old Dianxian finally thought of a word to describe it. This sword is like an emperor angry. The huge sword was so huge that it seemed to be piled up with the Milky Way, extinguishing the void and extinguishing the heavens. All tangible and qualitative objects are completely turned into powder at this moment. The void entered the deepest level of collapse, and even the uncontrollable void wind was torn apart. With the giant sword as the center, the void was shattered to form a violent vortex, madly swallowing everything. Even Yanli could not escape. Under this sword, even the rest of the heavens hundreds of millions of miles away were affected, and all began to shatter and shatter. The more than 400 Yinxian who walked out of the fairy formation were all destroyed by this sword at this moment, and none of the Yinxian could escape. One sword lost 400 cents. The old Dian Immortal had been so frightened, he even fled with all his strength when the 400 Yinxian was destroyed. But can it escape? The void battlefield has been out of control, and all the heavens outside the six-day realm have been destroyed and become fans. Originally, the six-day realm also avoided falling under this sword, but Dai woke up soberly and used his already damaged real life to forcibly shut out Jian Wushuang's sword. As the nine-turned Dian Immortal Di Qing, who had come out of the era when Zhen Wuyang became the emperor, faced Jian Wushuang, and faced his sword, there was a throbbing from the bottom of his heart. This sword even threatened him. Di Qingxiang resisted the dizziness in his head. Looking at the true shadow that made the heavens crawl under his feet, his eyes became clearer and brighter. This sword lasted a long time. When the incomparable sword intent turned into a lake and returned to the gate of heaven, the true shadow of selflessness standing in the void of heaven and earth slowly opened his eyes. Looking around, everything is turned into dust. Even heaven is no exception. Even the void has turned into the most primitive state of chaos, full of indescribable silence. At this moment, in the entire void battlefield, There are only more than a dozen immortals in front of the six-day realm portal, and thousands of top repairers. Without exception, all of them were blind in their eyes, staring at the front blankly, as if they hadn't recovered from the scene just now, and the more than 400 Yinxian army had been completely broken into powder, not even a bit of the fairy source, or even the bones, as if they had never appeared before. On the opposite side of Jian Wushuang, only a lonely figure remained. At this moment, only panic was left in his muddy eyes, as if it were the panic of the rest of his life. Both are dead, Old Maid Dian murmured. An ray of blood poured out from the corner of his mouth. He fled desperately, but in the end he was a step late, and suffered the most serious damage. He no longer knows how Mini Huanyan hasn't tasted the taste of severe damage, and now he has tasted it truly. He even believed that if he hadn't escaped in time, the immortal body would have been shattered, and the source of immortality would be gone. The power of a sword frightened him. At the same time, the old Dian was puzzled. This is like a sword of an emperor's anger. How could it be released by a small Zhao Yangxian? Slowly moving forward, Jian Wushuang, who stood holding his hand, finally came to him. The old Dian immortal raised his head, looked at him with a doubtful gaze, and finally said, I heard earlier that the sixth heavenly immortal used his own power to kill the 9 heavenly immortal monarch Chang dueling that Yanxian. Was it you? It's me. Jian Wushuang nodded, and didn't intend to hide it, because the matter was already here. He would never let him leave alive. You killed Chang dueling's sword at the beginning. Is it the current sword intent? Yes. After getting this answer, Old Maid Dian changed his expression and finally said lonely, I thought the rumor was nonsense. Now it seems that Chang dueling was indeed beheaded by you. Able to die under that sword, he died unjustly. The last question, did you create this sword, or did you accept the inheritance of a certain emperor? He asked. Only solemnity remained in his eyes. Jian Wushuang looked at him and said calmly, I created it and did not accept any inheritance. The old Tai Yinxian trembled, and his muddy pupils became a little bright at this moment. Chapter 49:14. He seemed to have entered a certain state, from panic to calm. You are only in the realm of Yanxian, but you can comprehend this sword, and even cross the border to kill Dianxian. I can no longer imagine where your future will go. If you don't participate in these disputes and live well, then I am afraid that you will disturb the entire Daisai domain, or the existence outside the Daisai domain. But you also need to know that if you are too stunning, you will definitely be killed. I can also predict your future. It must be too hard. If I can get a chance to survive today, I would like to see where you will go in the future, and whether you will completely overthrow this big division. Old Maid Dian looked at him excitedly. You are very different. Jian Wushuang looked at him also, with an invisible sword condensed in his palm. In any case, the enemies who saw his sword could not leave alive, especially Dian Immortal. Jian Wushuang never thought that Jin Wuyang and the entire heavenly court were good people, so he was walking cautiously. If Dian Immortal goes to Tongtian court, I am afraid that all unfavorable factors will squeeze him. The Zhen Wuyang, who was able to sweep through nearly 10 emperors and establish the heavenly court, would be nothing more than just a fingertip once the killing intent was moved on him. Therefore he must eliminate it from the source. The old Dian fairy must not leave alive. It seems you are not going to let me go, he asked. Jian Wushuang nodded, yes. In that case I will fight this one last time. Old Maid Dian seemed relieved, ready to let go. Under the previous sword, he has been wounded, and in this battle now, he has the belief that he must fall. Jian Wushuang also did not dare to underestimate him. Although he had already cut down the 2 Dian Immortals, he still did not dare to underestimate Dian Immortals. There is a fundamental difference between Yanxian and Dianxian, and Jian Wushuang might be hit hard if he doesn't pay attention. At the moment, the old Dian Immortal is in the 3rd stage, which is much higher than the previous Yuyan, so he can't relax his guard. With one step out, his black robe surged, and thousands of chain-like powers circulated around him, full of shocking momentum. That is the general trend that belongs to Dianxian, which makes Yanxian tremble. Jian Wushuang was not afraid, holding an invisible sword in his hand, and confronted him brazenly. At this moment, all the immortals and Dingxiu in the 6-day realm were watching this scene solemnly. The battle between Yanxian and Dianxian, an extremely unequal and almost impossible scene happened. This battle will deeply imprint every Dingxiu, and every Yanxian deep in his heart. What even they don't know is how far-reaching the impact of this battle is. When I was young or middle-aged, I had never seen a shock like yours, and even that high-ranking existence was somewhat depressed by your appearance. Your sword is too domineering and terrifying. Even I can't face it, but even so, I still need this battle. I want to see with my own eyes how surprised you will bring me, the old Dian fairy said slowly. His expression was already excited, as if he had returned to the old days. The corner of Jian Wushuang's mouth curled up, and his sword eyebrows sank quietly, and then 36,000 sword intent suddenly emerged from his back, twisting straight forward. Good come, he shouted in a deep voice, and at the same time all the Yanli chains covering his body rose up, strangling away like real dragons. 36,000 sword intents are all pinnacle swords, and Dian Immortal is not weak in dealing with it. The terrifying force burst out, and the already chaotic void battlefield was once again messed up. The dark Yanli chain was rapidly shattering. In the end, both disappear at the same time. When the Yanli Huamang in front of him dissipated, Jian Wushuang's figure had quietly reached the face of the old Dianxian. Facing such a Dian Immortal, Jian Wushuang's eyes were steady, and he held the invisible sword in his hand and slashed fiercely. The old Dian Immortal blocked him in time, and at the same time, an extremely dark shadow emerged from behind him, and then madly swallowed Xiang Jian Wushuang. At the same time, the true shadow of selflessness that exudes the blue meaning blessed him. When the incomparably dark real shadow touched the non-self real shadow, a large amount of black smoke was directly emitted, and then it retracted into his body again. The appearance of this scene even surprised the old Dian Immortal. He who has tempered his spirit to the peak can't actually corrode Jian Wushuang? Could it be that he also tempered his spiritual mind? Jian Wushuang naturally wouldn't know his thoughts at the moment, and the original intention of blessing the true shadow of the selfless was not actually initiated by him. The selfless true shadow seems to have a certain sense of self. When the deity is invaded by external forces, it will automatically bless him, which also protects him from spiritual infringement. However, even if there is no automatic protection from the true shadow of the selflessness, the divine consciousness erosion, released by the old Dian immortal, just now will definitely not erode him. As early as when Jian Wushuang was in the universe of divine power and ascended to the position of the universe, his divine consciousness had reached the state of perfect harmony and great perfection, and external forces could not intervene to influence his thoughts. Therefore, Jian Wushuang's fighting stance was very wanton. He swung his sword and opened and closed, slashing with one sword and one sword. Sparks overflowed. He seemed to be casting a sword, and the old Dianxian was like a sword embryo, constantly being tempered. If there are bystanders closer, you can see the obvious changes. The sword has no double-faced color and is calm, and every sword drop can easily break one side of the universe. And the Dian immortal who endures the temper, his complexion gradually turns red, and he can't even resist, and can only bear it silently. This horrified scene was completely reflected in the eyes of all Yinxian and Ding Xiu in the six-day realm, and everyone gasped. The most shocking of these is Gong Ziqian, with his eyes wide open, and he muttered innocently, "Well, what kind of thing is this guy? It's too scary." With the mere power of evolving the immortal, he almost crushed the immortal. Even though the son of Qian was the son of the emperor, he had never seen such a scene. As for Su Jin, who was alone, all eyes were on Jian Wushuang's body at this moment, and he was comprehending the sword style as much as possible. At the same time, he was also dreaming about when he could fight side by side with Jian Wushuang. Today's battle has left an indelible mark on the hearts of all Dingxiu and Yinxian. With one's own power, turning the tide, such a back figure has already conquered many silent hearts. With the blessings of the true shadow of Wu Self, Jian Wushuang now has completely crushed the severely injured old maid Dian. Under this heavy blow again and again, wisps of divine blood poured out from the corner of his mouth again. Old maid Dian already knew that his ultimate destination was to die by the sword. Chapter 49:15. Even now, he regrets that he has not chosen a correct path. If it fell under the previous sword intent that shook the sky and the earth, it would still be dead and dignified. But now that this situation has fallen, I am afraid that it will become the laughing stock of all ages. As Dian Immortal at the veteran level in the Daisai domain, he could not accept this result. Junior Yuet, he was furious, struggling directly with the immortal body to be injured, and blasted Jian Wushuang far away. The invisible sword in his hand shattered. Jian Wushuang put his right hand behind him without any trace, and looked at him calmly. The right hand, which was behind him, was already dripping with blood, dripping wet in the clothes. He still underestimated the power of Dian Immortal. If he hadn't avoided it in time, he would have suffered even more serious injuries. Junior, you should despise the old man. Although the old man has been injured, he may not have the power to fight, said the old man Dian angrily. Jian Wushuang ignored him, and when he lifted his palm, the chaos and the void shook, and 100,000 sword intent quietly emerged from behind him. Every sword intent carried a terrifying general trend, a total of 100,000 swords, all of which were the strongest blow. Looking at the 100,000 sword intent like a forest of swords, the old Mai Taiyan was also solemn. In the long and almost endless years till now, in the Wanggu era, he has seen too many immortals, even Dian immortals, but the only thing he has never seen before is Jian Xiao. The so-called sword repair is actually a very vague title, because after boarding the Yanxian, few Yanxian use foreign objects to improve themselves, but this is not absolute. Among them, Yanxian opened up the sword and controlled the real sword, so as to break through the bottleneck. The result of this is two completely different results. The bad result is that it drags down one's own cultivation level, and the path of cultivation falls into chaos, making it difficult to progress in this lifetime. And the good result is that it far surpasses the immortal generation in the same realm, and becomes the existence of shocking Tianjiao. But this kind of stunning arrogance has never even seen the old Dian immortal, who has experienced the most ancient. The only shocking heavenly arrogant he identified was the supreme being who walked out of the barren land, carried an unknown destiny, calmed the chaos with his own power, and finally became the emperor. But even the supreme being is purely cultivating itself, not foreign objects. Therefore, Jian Wushuang, who had cultivated his kendo to the extreme, brought the shock to the old Dian immortal, which was even the same as the shock he experienced when he saw the emperor for the first time. This is the second stunning arrogant that he agrees with, and the existence that is about to kill him. Jian Wushuang stood on the opposite side of him, then tapped his finger. In an instant, 100,000 sword intent swept up, facing the old Dian immortal stabbed fiercely. The shock wave erupted from the shining void made Yanxian unable to gain a foothold. Jian Wushuang stood in the same place, calmly looking at the center of the sacrificial explosion. He didn't think this could kill a Dian immortal. As if to confirm his conjecture, the sword intent that was still venting wildly at this moment stopped completely. Then the void twisted for a while, and an enchantment circle appeared, like a black hole, directly swallowing all the sword intent that was still venting, abruptly changing the situation of the battle. When all the 100,000 sword intents dissipated, the old Mai Taiyan immortal holding a pitch-black scepter slowly appeared. The enchantment circle like a black hole was released from the scepter, evading the attack of the sword intent. That's the case, Jianni still hurt him more or less. Chapter 49:16. The mighty river-shaped sword was intent in the void, almost swallowing the entire void. The strength training released by the old Dian immortal could no longer support it, and was swallowed by the sword intent from all directions. Void and silent, only the Kendo River rushes. Win-win. Yu Dingxiu couldn't help but said excitedly. And young Master Qian, who had almost escaped from the dead, was the most excited at this moment. The hundreds of Yanxian under his seat had all fallen, but he was still alive intact, and even his Yanli was not lost much. This was something he had not dared to think about before, and he had even considered serious injuries and being captured. But now everything has settled. The sun humbly shouted in excitement. Fucking Jian Tianguan, unparalleled in the world. Just as the same stone stirred up 1,000 layers of waves, all Dingxiu and Yin Xian in the six-day realm all shouted spontaneously. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. The voice pierced the void. They won this battle. This is an unimaginable battle, with nearly 1,000 fairy gods and 2 big gods joining. However, the Six Heavens realm only had more than 100 immortals. Facing the impact of nearly 1,000 immortals, they actually kept the Six Heavens realm. This is an unimaginable and incredible battle. But every surviving immortal Yan and Dingxiu knew that without those two, there would be no such ending. All the voices they shout spontaneously are their truest thoughts. However, at this moment, only Di Qing looked at Jian Wushuang with solemn eyes, and at the void that the river vented that day. He had a hunch that dying immortal would never die so easily. At this moment, Jian Wushuang did not relax. His eyes were still fixed on the center of Jianhe. It's good that this sword can kill it, but if it can't kill it, it will fight again. When Jianhe completely dissipated, an almost unsteady figure appeared. His immortal body was almost on the verge of breaking, and the dark power escaped from the body, and then dissipated into the void. It can be seen that his fairy source is about to collapse. Jian Wushuang secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The fairy source collapsed. Even for Dian Immortal, it was an irreversible sign of death. The old Dian Immortal is about to die. Although he was about to stand unsteadily, he still straightened the immortal body and looked at Jian Wushuang fixedly. You are too far from my imagination. The old man is convinced of defeat. After saying this, he knelt and sat in the void, seeming to be waiting for the death. But old man, I still want to live. Jian Wushuang stepped forward slowly, and he didn't have much disgust at this old Dian Immortal, and he was more calm. And the reason why he stepped forward was to make sure that he would not release his mind to escape. Just when Jian Wushuang was less than 1 foot away from the old Dian Immortal, the old Dian Immortal, who had closed his eyes and waited for his fall, suddenly opened his eyes. Then at an unimaginable speed, he shot Jian Wushuang like a thunderstorm. This is really too fast, and even Jian Wushuang can't react. A black and extremely sharp scepter went into his heart fiercely. Old Maid Dian changed his previous decay, and his eyes were full of madness and pride. Junior, although you are very strong, you are still a bit too tender. Are you so sure that I don't even have a chance to fight back? Looking down at the jet-black scepter on his chest, Jian Wushuang's calm eyes fluctuated somewhat. Then he said quietly, Idiot, you didn't get in. The old Dian Immortal was taken aback for a moment, and immediately looked into his hand subconsciously. Crack. Immediately afterwards, bursts of crystal cracking resounded. That black scepter was covered with cracks in an instant, and it shattered directly from the tip of the stick. No, it's impossible. How could my cane be like this? The old Diancian was shocked and couldn't imagine what happened. Do you think I don't have any defense? Jian Wushuang said quietly, and at the same time waved his hand to tear off the broken black robe, revealing a dark blue glow. Every piece of azure blue beetle is like alive, all in a regular rhythm, magnificent to the extreme. This is Chang Dueling's Jiutian Yishuan? The old Mai Diancian was panicked, and he finally knew why his rod could not cause serious damage to Jian Wushuang. There are rumors in the entire Great Division that the Nine Heavens Immortal Monarch often orders a treasure that can resist all external forces, and can even block the Emperor's full blow. Rumor has it that the Nine Heavens Yishuan is only azure blue, composed of 99,000 beetle leaves, extremely magnificent. Right now, the blue armor on Jian Wushuang's body is not Chang Dueling's Jiutian Yixian. The old Dian Immortal only felt that the blood in his body was completely cold. He never expected that Jian Wushuang would wear a 9-day clothing xian, thus resisting his blow. Jian Wushuang's eyes were joking, allowing the black scepter on his chest to be completely broken, and then he stretched out his hand to pinch the old Mai Dianxian's neck. Chang Dueling was killed by you. Is his Jiutian Yixian also seized by you? There is no fighting spirit in his eyes, only despair is left. I didn't want to seize his Jiutian Yixian. This armor was given to me at the last moment. Jian Wushuang said. Hearing this, he seemed to feel something. He suddenly grinned. Yes, also, who is not in love when you are about to die? You and I don't have blood feuds. This battle doesn't have to happen. But since everything is irreversible, the old man will ask for something at the end. He looked at Jian Wushuang. The old man wants to decide on his own. No. Jian Wushuang refused without any hesitation, leaving no room for it. Originally, he still had some compassion for him, but the last attack killed. If Jian Wushuang hadn't put on Jiutiani Xian in advance, I am afraid he would be hit hard, and even the fairy body would be broken. The old Dianxian also knew the reason, and had no face to ask for others, so he could only close his eyes and die. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate anymore. Thousands of sword intent appeared directly in his right palm, and then blasted on his fairy body. The sword intent surged, tearing the old Dian to pieces without any hindrance. The source of the fairy was destroyed. The fairy body turned into powder, scattered in the void. A Tier 3 Dian immortal fell into Jian Wu's hands. So far, the battle that almost included 5 emperors ended at the cost of losing more than 1,000 Yanxian. This battle was the most tragic one after Zhen Wuyang opened up the Desai domain. Chapter 49:17. Not only did Yanxian die worthlessly, but even Dianxian died. 9 Heavens immortal monarch Chang Duoling, dead immortal Yuyan, and the 3 Dian immortals of old Mai Dian all died in this battle, and they were all beheaded by Jian Wushuang. This can no longer be described by the battle between ordinary emperors and sons. If the extent of its destruction is let go, I am afraid that only the heavenly court where Zhen Wuyang sits can control the situation. When this shocking battle finally ended, the originally silent void battlefield broke out again with a shocking cry. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Tianguan, the world is unparalleled. Jian Wushuang, whose back was facing the 6th heavens realm, suddenly paled a bit at this moment, and then a ray of divine blood poured out from the corner of his mouth, dripping onto Jiutiani Xian, and was quickly absorbed. In the end, he underestimated the insidious and terrifying old age Dian. If he hadn't put on the 9 heavens cloth profound in advance, only the final attack would be enough to make his fairy body instantly shattered. The full blow of the 3rd-ranked Dian immortal was still terrifying after all. Fortunately, he was not severely injured after wearing the Jiutiani Xian. At the same time, what made Jian Wushuang a little frightened was that Chang Duoling's Jiutiani Xuan had been pierced by a sword from his heart, breaking a gap, and if the old Dian immortal attacked and killed it, it would deviate. At 1 inch, Jian Wushuang couldn't escape the end of silence. The battlefield changes rapidly, and the ending may be reversed every moment. But there is only one ending right now. Jian Wushuang stands alone in the void, as if he is crushing the eternity. Jian Wushuang, the world is unparalleled. All Dingxiu and Yanxian rushed to Jian Wushuang spontaneously at this moment. Brother Sword, Brother Jian, Big Brother Sword. At this moment, Chuanxiu, Cui Jing, Chen Qing, Wei Liujia, and Zhao Ting all greeted them with sincere smiles on their faces. Even Diqing, who has always been calm and extremely arrogant, nodded to Jian Wushuang at this moment. Wushuang, what he did is very good. Looking at the faces after the battle, Jian Wushuang also smiled, and smiled from the bottom of his heart, and then he solemnly bowed his hands. Everyone, we won. All Dingxiu cheered, and the most humble Su Jin looked at Jian Wushuang from a distance, her eyes flushed slightly. He didn't know when he would be able to catch up with Jian Wushuang. He didn't dare to hope, he could only watch from a distance. Maybe one day in the future, he will be qualified to stand by his side. If it weren't for the emptiness to be too chaotic and broken, Chen Qing and Fengshan could not wait to raise Jian Wushuang to cheer. Immediately afterwards, the thin purple robe that hugged Xiao Dijuan came from the chaotic void, and both of them were soaked in divine blood, almost falling. Jian Wushuang saw this scene, and when he was about to speak, the last immortal formation that had been silent suddenly turned out of immortal patterns. 100,000 fairy patterns flowed, and the chaotic void was illuminated at this moment. At this moment, all Yanxian and Dingxiu looked solemn again. They all know that the circulation of the fairy formation indicates that there will be a large army arriving on the battlefield soon. The excitement on their faces has not even subsided, but is replaced by bitterness. The thin purple robe hugged Xiao Dijuan and came to Jian Wufang. His face was extremely old. Guardian Jiantian retreat. The only remaining forces can no longer suffer losses. Jian Wushuang was silent. Ding Xiao and Yin Xian behind him were silent, waiting for him to make the final decision. At this moment, a cold and disdainful voice resounded from the fairy array. Want to retreat? Dreaming. With this voice resounding through the void, huge and mighty immortals walked out of the immortal formation. Seeing this scene, even Jian Wushuang's heart sank. Hundreds of Yangxians came to the battlefield of the void. A whole 100 Yinxian with extremely abundant developmental power joined the battlefield, which was a crushing blow to the Six-Day Realm and others who had almost no power to fight. Di Qing has been severely injured, and Xuanqiu, Chen Qing and other Yangxians have been severely injured more or less, and it is no longer difficult to fight. As for the top repair for Yanxian, it is almost dispensable. In the entire Six-Day Realm, there is still the power of a battle now. Only Jian Wushuang is left. The 100 evangelists who came out of the immortal formation quickly dispersed as soon as they appeared on the void battlefield, and surrounded them all, obviously not planning to let one go. When the immortal formation finally died out, a Yinggu Yinxian dressed in scarlet gold armor walked out of it. He surrounded the heavens, and even the heavens surrendered to him. The extremely heroic face is full of supreme majesty, terrifying to the extreme. Seeing his appearance, Jian Wushuang's eyes condensed. This Yinggu Yinxian wearing a red gold armor is no one else, but the third emperor under the seat of Zhenliang Gongziyu. He is the representative of arrogance and arrogance. As early as the battle for the peach in the heavenly court, he wanted to break through the ban on the fairy peach with his own power, and enjoy the peach alone, and finally fell out of the game. In the former heavenly court of Lu Crow Emperor, he was severely defeated by Jian Wushuang, and was almost beaten to death. Now, he has appeared on the battlefield of the void again, which has shown that he and the sun are on the same line. Although young Master Yu is arrogant, he has mastered the immortal style, which is not to be underestimated. Especially at the moment, the pressure he exudes is extremely strong. At this moment, even if you want to escape, it is a luxury. The young Master Yu, who stepped on the path of heaven and wore a red gold armor, could not help but smile coldly when Yinghua's gaze slowly swept over the remaining Yanxian and Dingxiu before the Six-Day Realm. Especially when he saw the enraged little emperor, he could hardly help laughing. But soon he recovered his dignity again, squinted to Xiaodigen, then said in a deep voice, Gong Ziyan, I have already found out the real culprit who made the fifth brother fall, and you are the real culprit who killed the fifth brother. Now I will capture you and hand it over to the emperor. Gong Ziyu directly pushed such a crime to Xiao Dijuan, which was something Jian Wushuang hadn't expected. He was the person who witnessed the battle of killing the emperor. Chapter 49:18. Now that there are only more than 10 eternal evangelists left, and no more than 1,000 top repairers, facing the eternal army, who rejoined the void battlefield, there is no power at all. Even with Jian Wushuang, it is difficult to reverse the situation. But the current situation is not that they don't want to escape, but that they have no way to escape, and can only fight against the trapped beast. Jian Wushuang quickly sorted out several ideas to escape in his mind, but they were all rejected by him in the end. Di Qing, they were all more or less hit hard. If they left resolutely, they would be even more passive. After thinking for a while, Jian Wushuang's sound transmission reached Di Qing and the others. You will go first later, and I will leave it for you, don't worry. When they heard this, their faces were a little sad, but they all knew that this was the best plan. And if they continued to stay in the void battlefield, there would be no meaning. Wearing a red gold armor and stepping on the heavenly Tao, Gong Ziyu suddenly pulled out the real sword on his waist and pointed it directly at the sky. Catch Gong Ziyan! In an instant, the evangelists distributed throughout the void battlefield all released their majestic evangelism training at this moment. A total of 100 Yinxian shots and 100 Yanli practitioners surrounded them from all directions and almost immediately trapped them completely. Each force training is a full blow of an immortal, and it is almost impossible to break. At this moment, even the void is illuminated. Gong Ziya's eyes were full of pride and hatred. Obviously, he still remembered the last time he fought for the peach in the heavenly court, and now he can finally be ashamed. Facing this overwhelming blow, Jian Wushuang quietly closed his eyes. Numerous tassel-like divine patterns flowed quietly from his body, and then the true shadow of the selfless blessed his body, making his entire body exude a hazy brilliance. The next moment, he opened his eyes suddenly. Thunder and sword intent were entangled, and the true shadow of a giant sword condensed from pure sword intent emerged from behind him, standing upright in the void full of majesty that cannot be seen directly. The true shadow of the giant sword is as high as hundreds of millions of feet. Jian Wushuang shouted in a low voice, his arms suddenly raised, as if he was holding a sword hilt, sinking and pressing down. In an instant, the heavens died, and the chaotic void shattered and collapsed again. The true shadow of the huge sword, which is full of billions of feet, tore through all obstacles and fell down. Under this sword, the encircling circle of the power of 100 immortals was broken directly. As if a disaster had come, all Yinxian watched this scene in shock, and even forgot to avoid it. Under this sword, nearly 20 Yinxian had no time to escape and died on the spot, and the encircling circle was directly torn open. From this, the void was plowed into a crack of hundreds of millions of miles, and the mad wind of void raged. Leave soon. Jian Wushuang stood with his hands behind him, looking at them calmly. All Dingxiu gritted their teeth, and then rushed towards the boundless void with all their strength. Di Qing and Jian Wushuang glanced at each other, nodded silently, and then directly encased the Chuanqiu and others, and went straight to the void. So far, on the entire void battlefield, Dingxiu and Yinxian have been reduced by more than half. The Sun Yugai was dumbfounded, and he hadn't recovered from the scene just now. The scene just now was too shocking. Not only Gong Ziyu, but even the Yinxian army was in shock. You leave too, we'll be here soon, Jian Wushuang said as he looked at the little emperor beside him. His voice is beyond doubt. But he just smiled weakly. If you are here, I can't leave alone. His son Yu wants my life, which has nothing to do with you. I stay here, and the worst is to leave you away to survive. Jian Wushuang was silent. He understood the meaning of his words. But before he could continue to speak, Xiao Dijuan straightened his clothes and took a step forward. His handsome and coquettish face is full of coldness at the moment. Gong Ziyu, my son Yin is here. You can handle it, but let them go. After recovering from the shock, Gong Ziyu's eyes flashed with a deep jealous color, and he naturally recognized Jian Wushuang, the mysterious person who had frustrated Gong Zizhen in the heavens. Taking a deep breath, Gong Ziyu directly stretched out his hand and waved, "Catch Gong Ziyan!" In an instant, dozens of Yangxians came from all directions. In the next moment, the sudden change. The fastest Xian with a digital punch suddenly stopped in place. And then the Xian's body broke into countless pieces. Zheng dash, the fine sound of gold and iron strikes resounded in the void. Holding the invisible sword, Jian Wushuang with the Xuanhe pattern flowing all over his body, walked forward slowly. He killed several Yinxian with a single sword, which was extremely terrifying. Gong Ziyu stepped back subconsciously, facing Jian Wushuang. He felt inexplicably lingering. Another Yinxian brazenly rushed towards Jian Wushuang, and Wubi's Yanli power crashed down. A sword cut horizontally. The sword intent was vertical and horizontal, instantly swallowing Na Yinxian, and smashed into pieces in a neat manner. Go, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice when he came to Xiaodigen's face. He didn't hesitate anymore. After a light nod, he was ready to leave. Seeing this scene, Gong Ziyu's eyes suddenly condensed. Want to leave? Leave it to me. All the immortals listened to orders, trapped them here regardless of the cost, and must not let them go. He shouted loudly. At this moment, there were more than 70 Yangxians left on the void battlefield. They looked at each other, and then they flew towards Jian Wushuang. The power of growth released by more than 70 Yangxians is still extremely shocking. Void trembles. Jian Wushuang's heart is slightly shocked. Facing so many encirclement of immortals, he still has tremendous pressure. After slaying the dead fairy Yuyin, he kept fighting against the old Maidian immortal again, which had already overdrawn the power of his immortal body to the extreme. In this situation, he couldn't release the sword intent of the word lake at all. Jian Wushuang is already at the end of the battle, facing so many immortals. All he can do is to get Xiaotigen and Thin Zipeo out of danger. Yu reading www. Akanshu. Calm thinking of this, he suddenly threw the invisible sword in his hand. The 10 or so Yangxians who had been surrounded in front saw this scene, and hurriedly avoided a path. The invisible sword tore a crack directly in the void. Then Jian Wushuang waved his arm, and pushed Xiao Dijuan and the thin purple robe out. 1,000,000 miles. Chapter 49-19. Seeing that his safety was guaranteed, Gong Ziyu took a sigh of relief and looked at him with a grin. It's so funny, instead of running away, you are throwing yourself into the net. Tell me what benefit the Sun Yin gave you, so that you can save him so desperately? Jian Wushuang heard the words, did not speak, obviously too lazy to reply to him. It seemed that he felt being underestimated, and young master Yu felt annoyed in his heart, but soon calmed down. No matter what benefits the Sun Yin gives you, I will give you more generous benefits, as long as you stay with me. How about? His Sun Yin is by no means a good person. Even his own brother can kill. Do you think you will have a good end if you follow him? Instead of following him, it is better to follow me. I assure you that I will give you what you want. Gong Ziyu said slowly. A triumphant color flashed in his eyes. And the next moment, what responded to him was an extremely sharp sword intent. He was shocked and hurriedly changed his body shape, but he was still a step late. The sharp sword intent directly left a deep wound on his cheek. Divine blood dripped continuously, soaking his golden armor. Damn thing, you dare to hurt me? Young Master Yu was furious to the extreme. Letting blood drip off his face, he suddenly raised his sword. All Yinxian will kill him at all costs. The overwhelming Yinxian crushed and arrived, and the mighty Yin power surged down. Jian Wushuang still stood still on the spot, leading the sword with his hand, fighting the exhaustion of his power. Once again released Wushuang Kendo. Wushuang Kendo, Xingdehe Jianyini, the second style. River. The long river of swordsmanship, which started from nowhere, shattered the void and gushed out from every crack, and then gathered in a line, madly rushing towards every Yinxian. All Yangxians were shocked when they saw this scene, and they naturally felt the majestic momentum contained in this sword river. The foresight Yinxian retreated and walked close to 10,000 feet, but there were also Yinxian who planned to resist, but they were directly strangled into pieces by Jianhe, without even making a sound. Under this sword, nearly 20 Yinxian died. Only after these few encounters, there were only less than 50 immortals brought by Gong Ziyu. A wisp of cold sweat gushed from his temples, and he finally understood why the Yinxian, who had been dispatched, had disappeared cleanly. That Jian Wushuang is very strong. Although he was the peak of immortal relations, he easily obliterated the immortal relations without any effort. Could it be that he really killed Chang Duoling? Gong Ziyu's pupil shrank suddenly, and he already regretted coming to this mess. Looking at the Kendo River that was still erupting, Yinxian continued to die. Gong Ziyu's expression was uncertain, and in the end his heroic face showed a bit fierce. Immediately afterwards, he stretched out his hand and wiped it on his waist, and a bronze bell the size of a wine cup appeared in his hand. With the appearance of this bronze bell, the energy of the surrounding millions of voids fell silent, showing a strange dark blue color. And around the bronze bell, dark blue crystals are condensing, as if there is life and rhythm. Seeing the bell exposed in the void, Gong Ziyu's eyes flashed with fleshy pain. Sung Yuzhong, this last time, I hope you can kill all the enemies in front of me for me. He murmured, then gritted his teeth, and threw the bronze bell in his hand into the void. The next moment, that bronze bell rose against the storm, and almost instantly formed a terrifying tripod that could encompass thousands of heavens. This scene was too shocking. With the appearance of this bell ding, it seemed that even the boundless void was covered by it. This Wangu great bell, named Sung Yuzhong, appeared, causing all the eternal immortals to tremble, and the originally broken heavenly Tao could not withstand the pressure, and was fragmented. Jian Wushuang, who was in the center, felt that a life-and-death crisis that had never been imagined was approaching, making him almost ready to escape, without even thinking about it. But this Wangu Dazhong is too vast. The universe it encompasses is almost unimaginable. So Jian Wushuang has no possibility to escape. He was ready to escape desperately, only to feel that the strength of his body had become a dead concrete pool, directly imprisoning him in it, unable to move at all. A wisp of cold sweat flowed from Jian Wushuang's temples, and he could feel the breath that contained him. It was the way of heaven. It is a very old way of heaven. It is a way of heaven that does not belong to this era, and it is an extremely old and terrifying rule. Facing such a Tsungyu bell with the ancient heavenly path, Jian Wushuang had nothing to do. He was completely restricted, and he couldn't even do it in the blink of an eye. This is a big ban. I am afraid that even the truth of the heyday cannot get out of the pressure of this Kangwu Zhong. And this Tsungyu clock seemed to be conscious. After binding Jian Wushuang, it quickly shrunk, and from the original supreme distance, a big clock of thousands of miles was formed in a flash. Within this big clock, Jian Wushuang was bound by the dark blue heavenly power, unable to move at all. At this moment, all Yangtzeans are surrounded by the clock, looking at the clock solemnly. Afterwards, young Master Yu moved slowly, his eyes filled with resentment. His Tsungyu bell is the supreme immortal tool belonging to the Wangu era. It was once the treasure in the hands of his Emperor Zhen Wuyang. It killed countless Dayan immortals, and the heavenly laws contained in it were irresistible. Even the Emperor will suffer. It's just that this Tsungyu clock is now dying, and its service life is only this last time. This Tsungyu Zhong, as the most powerful life-saving trump card of Gong Ziyu, was now used on Jian Wushuang. The thing wasted my last chance of Tsungyu Zhong. I swear, I will turn you into blood, and you will be lost. Gong Ziyu roared in anger. As his voice fell, Tsungyu bell rang, and countless magnificent flowers bloomed from it, illuminating the boundless void. In the Tsungyu bell, Jian Wushuang instantly spouted blood from Qiqiao. He only felt that his whole body was about to be shattered. The unimaginable ancient rules of heaven contain unknown unknowns that can't be said, making Jian Wushuang helpless. Could it be that I fell like this? Divine blood gushed from the corner of his mouth, and he couldn't break free at all. The dark blue heavenly rules were quickly devouring everything about him. The immortal body, transformed from an ultra-perfect chaotic creature, is rapidly shattering at this moment. However, Jian Wushuang had no way to break free. This was the first time he was truly helpless. That kind of irresistible force is too domineering. Gongzi's hideous face was reflected in his eyes, and all Yangtzeans laughed at this moment. Chapter 49:20. A guy who can even kill Dayan immortal, even make all the immortals lower their eyebrows. Being besieged and suffering at this moment, and going to fall irreversibly. There is nothing more pleasant than this kind of thing. Gongzi didn't even bother to wait and see. The terrible Tsungyu bell couldn't even escape the Nineth ranked Yinxian, let alone a little Yinxian. The immortal body is collapsing. The immortal body disintegrates like stars, never returning. At this moment, under the siege of the dark blue sky, Jian Wushuang's consciousness was blurred. The fairy body is inevitably declining. Even if he is still immortal, I am afraid it will be silent for endless years. Jian Wushuang wanted to contend against the Tao of that day, but found that everything was useless. It was a suppression that completely surpassed the realm, which was unimaginable. Even if he tried his best, he didn't have the slightest chance to destroy the Tsungyu bell. Did I just fall like this? But I'm unwilling. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes red. The divine blood flowing on his body is quickly repairing the dilapidated immortal body, seeming to be contending against the heavens. Huh. Gong Ziyu's gaze condensed. He saw that his figure turned out to be against the heavens. How is this possible? He was shocked, knowing that even the 9th-ranked Dian immortal could be convinced by this Song Yu Bell. But soon he relaxed again, with some palpitations. Because Jian Wushuang only resisted for a moment, and then irresistibly decayed. When young Master Ziyu was feeling a little palpitating, it was unimaginable that a Yin Xian could compete with Song Yu Bell. Just when Gong Ziyu was about to get to know Jian Wushuang in advance, two shaky figures walked from a distant void. The leader was Xiao Dijuan. His luxurious clothes had been damaged, and his exposed skin was full of wounds. But at this moment, his eyes are full of the majesty of the emperor. He glanced at Gong Ziyu, and then walked towards the rapidly shrinking Song Yu Bell. Upon seeing this, Gong Ziyu was overjoyed. He never thought that Xiao Dijuan would actually throw himself into the trap, saving him the trouble of searching. His Royal Highness, do you want us? Yu Yanxian asked. Gong Ziyu waved his hand, with an arrogant expression. I want to see what he is doing back with this waste, and I will take him down later. All Yanxian promised. All looked at this scene with a smile. The long and slender palm covered with blood was attached to the outer wall of Tsang Yuzhong. Looking at Jian Wushuang who was suffering in the clock, Xiao Dijuan knocked on the outer wall with his fingers. Wushuang, Wushuang. Bloody Jian Wushuang, who was about to fall, opened his eyes with difficulty, looked at the figure outside Tsang Yuzhong. He sighed secretly. Listen to me. Xiao Dijuan affixed to the outside of Tsang Yu Bell, and said clearly, take out the golden jade ring I gave you earlier and open it. Jian Wushuang could hear his voice, but at this time, it would be difficult to move a finger, let alone take out the golden jade ring in his arms. The little emperor outside Tsang Yuzhong seemed to have known his difficulties, and began to feel at a loss. And young Master Yu, who was far away, heard something was wrong, and he hurriedly issued orders. Hurry up, catch young Master Yen, don't let him speak. All Yanxian hurriedly set off to catch Xiaodigen. Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang, who was about to die, struggled to break the fairy body, and stretched his palm into his arms with all his strength. Even the ancient unknown heaven can't help but shake. The golden jade ring was taken out, and a unique color appeared in the palm of Jian Wushuang's white bones. Yeah, he roared. His fingers pushed away the jade ring in the center of the golden jade ring. In an instant, an even more remote and unknown aura of heaven burst out of it, turning into billions of tassels. The appearance of that kind of aura made Jian Wushuang loose, and the dark cyan heavenly Tao bound around him was directly broken. Immediately afterwards, a supreme true figure wearing a white shirt and looking like a star walked out of the golden jade ring. All Wang Gu Tian Dao and Song Yu Bell was crawling on the ground at this moment, and shuddered. He seemed to be an ordinary person without any power, but there was a certain kind of authority in his eyes. And all the immortals who saw this true shadow were frightened, almost unable to stand still, and hurriedly knelt down in the void. The immortal bodies were shaking. Including Jian Wushuang, they were all shocked. What he never expected was that in the golden jade ring that Xiaodigen gave him, there was a true shadow of Xinmiang Emperor. Moreover, this true shadow actually belonged to the true shadow of Emperor Zhen Wuyang in his peak period, full of the meaning of contemplation. The already stupid young master Yu never expected that a small Xiao Yangxian would actually hold a true shadow of his emperor in his hands. This is simply incredible and unimaginable. There is no real shadow of the emperor in his hands. With the appearance of the true shadow of the Zhen Wuyang emperor's peak and prosperous period, Song Yu Bell began to mourn, and it could not withstand the pressure of the emperor. The middle-aged Zhen Wuyang Zhening, at this moment, seemed to have a faint doubt in the eyes of Wan Yu. He looked at the barrier of Tsang Yuzhong, and then casually brushed. This contains the Tsang Yu Bell of the Supreme Way, and it is directly broken. The residue was scattered in the void, and soon disappeared. Then, Zhen Wuyang Zhening looked at Jian Wushuang who was dying, and a bit of satisfaction and uncertainty flashed across his eyebrows. Finally he said, Are you Yenner? Jian Wushuang, who had no strength to speak, couldn't even shake his head, so he could only look at him firmly. And that Zhen Wuyang Zhening laughed. Yes, my son Yin'er really has the posture of the emperor, even though he is so embarrassed. But it does not matter. There is a father. No one wants to hurt you. Jian Wushuang is completely speechless. It's just a fate. The true shadow of Zhen Wuyang actually regards him as a son. Don't they know each other? Just as Jian Wushuang's spiritual thoughts were empty, Zhen Wuyang, who was full of anger, already looked at the Yangtzeans who were all kneeling in the void. A group of ants dared to hurt me, Yen'er. The Sun Yu knelt directly into the void with a plop, and said in shock, "The Emperor, it's me, Mu'er, your third son." Huh, the third son? Zhen Wuyang's true shadow was immediately puzzled. Isn't I the only one, Yen'er? Why is there another third son? Gong Ziyu knew this was a terrible thing, and if he couldn't explain it clearly, he might not have a chance to leave here. So he acted decisively, cut his wrist directly, and spilled the blood in the meridian. If the Emperor doesn't believe it, check the blood of the child. Please remember the domain name of the book's first publication. Mobile version reading URL. Chapter 49-21. Gong Ziyu's voice resounded in the void battlefield, and all Yinxian who knelt on the ground let out a sigh of relief. As long as the Emperor can be verified, they will certainly follow. All Yinxian could see that this true shadow of Emperor Wuyang was actually sealed for too long, so he didn't know the identity of young Master Yu. Looking at the colorful divine blood sprinkled in the void, the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang was doubtful, and looked at Gong Ziyu solemnly. The corners of his eyebrows twitched, and the cut he made on his wrist just a moment ago was a bit big, causing the blood to flow out not slowly, but a blowout. If this continues, I am afraid it will become weak after a while. The Emperor, you can find out after checking it. Gong Ziyu said nervously, stretching out his hand. Zhen Wuyang's true shadow did not hesitate anymore, and with a wave of his palm, he fetched a drop of divine blood. A drop of colorful divine blood lies in the palm of his hand, condensed from an unknown aura that is above the heavens. Zhen Wuyang looked at his hand. The blood of the gods throbbed like a swallow, leaping happily, and in a blink of an eye it directly entered the true shadow, moisturizing the true shadow. Retracting his palm, Zhen Wuyang took a deep breath. His eyes softened when he looked at Gong Ziyu. You said you are my third son? Gong Ziyu was overjoyed and hurriedly said, Back to the Emperor. I am the third son under your seat, Gong Ziyu. Zhen Wuyang heard the words. His original soft eyes suddenly became sharp again. Like two heavenly paths, the directly pressed young man Yu Chong couldn't kneel down. Then why do you want to kill your eldest brother? The cold sweat came out again in an instant, but he quickly handed over and made a bitter and deep enmity, and he murmured, The Emperor, you don't know. Although the eldest brother is the eldest brother, young Master Yin has never done a thing that the eldest brother should do. He was brutal to our 6 brothers. A matter of contravention. 5th young Master Mo, he sent Yinxian to kill. Poor 5th brother, his head was cut off, and Xianyuan was crushed. Gong Ziyu stood up and said, eyes full of tears, and then couldn't help crying. Zhen Wuyang Zhening, who heard this incident, was so shocked that he couldn't help clenching his palms under the Chinese clothes. Then he murmured, I have 7 sons. Zheng Er actually gave birth to 7 sons for me? The corners of young Master Yes' mouth twitched. It seemed that he had brewed so many emotions. Zhen Wuyang didn't even notice. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's Zhening returned to his mind, and his brows frowned. If, as he said, the 5th son was killed by Gong Ziyan, then I am afraid that today's affairs will be extremely troublesome. The true shadow left by this true Wuyang in the peak period could not be kept for too long, and it was even slowly dissipating. So soon, Zhen Wuyang looked at Jian Wushuang, who was kneeling in the void covered in blood, and asked, Yen'er, what he said is the truth, but you send Yinxian to kill the 5th son under my seat. Being hit by the supreme heavenly Daoan Songyu Bell was so severe that Jian Wushuang still couldn't speak at this moment. And the Sun Yu, who was on the opposite side, saw this scene and hurriedly said, The Emperor, you are mistaken, he is not the Sun Yen. The one behind you is the Sun Yen. Zhen Wuyang was startled when he heard the words, and subconsciously looked behind him, only to see that besides Jian Wushuang, there was a handsome young man standing behind him. With eyes facing each other, Zhen Wuyang frowned soon. Little Emperor immediately bowed slowly. Yenner, I have seen the Emperor. He didn't say much, and directly stretched out his palm, and placed it on Xiao Daijin's forehead to probe. Soon, Zhen Wuyang's eyes flashed with sadness and pain. The special physique of the little Emperor could not be concealed at all. So Yenner, your physique. Zhen Wuyang couldn't speak anymore, turned around lonely, and looked at Jian Wushuang who had recovered. Then which son are you again? The Emperor. It's wrong, he is not the Emperor at all, but the official of the Emperor. Gong Ziyu hurriedly corrected. When Zhen Wuyang heard this, his brows condensed, and he immediately took out a divine blood from Jian Wushuang's body. The mystery of the divine blood is changeable, showing a hazy color, making it difficult for Yanxian to observe its core. In Zhen Wuyang's palm, Jian Wushuang's blood was also pulsating, seeming to have some unknown familiarity and tentativeness, but it did not blend into Zhen Wuyang's true shadow, but kept walking. Why, I have a very strong sense of familiarity. Looking at the profound blood in his hand that seemed to be protected by some kind of breath, Zhen Wuyang's Zhen couldn't help but set out to relieve that breath. But soon he was surprised to find that he could not undo the restriction on this drop of blood. Zhen Wuyang's eyes became serious in an instant. He looked at Jian Wushuang and asked again, You really are not my emperor? Why do I feel a familiar feeling in you? Jian Wushuang was at a loss. It has only been a few decades since he came to Dayanhuan from the Divine Power universe. But before that, he had not had any intersection with the entire Desiyu and the heavenly court of Zhenwiang. Being able to feel the familiar feeling from him is really tantamount to fantasy. Just when Jian Wushuang was about to deny, the little emperor who hadn't spoken for a long time said, The emperor, he is indeed not your emperor. Zhen Wuyang heard the words and stopped speaking, but the confusion in his eyes deepened. The aura exuding from Jian Wushuang's body feels too familiar to him, like a certain cognitive feeling that is constantly cutting. The young man standing on the opposite side, watching this stagnant scene, couldn't help but secretly worry. Then he gritted his teeth and calm again and said, Father, please be the master of the fifth brother, and deprive Gongzi Yen of the fairy bones. Void and silent, only this sentence resounded. Depriving the fairy bones. For the little emperor who is unable to practice and has no fairy roots, is completely stripping away his last fairy road. Once the fairy bone peels off, he will fall in a very short period of time, and there is no way to reverse it. Gong Ziyu wanted Xiao Dijuan to fall completely. After hearing this sentence, various complex emotions flowed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes. In the end he looked at Xiaodijin. Yenner, have you done anything like that? Little Emperor Junqing smiled coldly, his eyes calm to the extreme. The Emperor, my son's personality has never changed since he was young. Whether you believe it or not, I don't bother to do this kind of thing. Chapter 49-22. When Xiao Dijuan said this, only a sneer remained in his eyes. And whoever has done that kind of thing, only who knows it in his own mind. After hearing this, Gong Ziyu only felt hot in his ears. He gritted his teeth and said, You are still arguing the emperor, you must never listen to his side words. I am a one-sided word, then you are not a one-sided word. Of course, if you have evidence, you might as well put it up and verify it on the spot. Xiaodijin said coldly, not giving way. After hearing this sentence, young Master Yu gritted his teeth secretly. Naturally he couldn't produce evidence. Because young Master Mo died too hastily. The mysterious man who killed young Master Mo did not leave any evidence at the scene. Even if the evidence was left, with the complete destruction of Baitian Xianzhou, it no longer exists. In this stagnant atmosphere, Zhen Wuyang looked at Gong Ziyu, then waved his hand. Stop talking about this matter. You take your seat Yanxian and leave. Gong Ziyu was taken aback, and then hurriedly said, The Emperor, how is this? Without finishing a sentence, Zhen Wuyang suddenly released unparalleled coercion, overwhelming everything. Under this coercion, Yanxian couldn't get a foothold, and almost disappeared directly. Well, the emperor, we will leave now. Gong Ziyu, who was kneeling in the void and could hardly lift his head, said with difficulty. Zhen Wuyang didn't look at him anymore, and directly waved his palm to remove the pressure. The relieved young master Yu let out a sigh, hiding his resentment in his heart, and then quickly left the void battlefield with less than 50 yenxian. At this point, the entire void battlefield was finally calmed down, and the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang was about to dissipate. Countless stars emerged from behind him, and then disappeared into the void. This true shadow that had been sealed in the ring by Zhen Wuyang from an unknown time was about to dissipate. Yenner, the real shadow of Zhen Wuyang, was full of guilt and reluctance at the moment. He stretched out his palm to touch Xiao Daijin's cheek, but Xiaodajin subconsciously avoided his palm, then nodded and bowed his head. A touch of loneliness flashed in Zhen Wuyang's eyes, but then he recovered his calm, and finally the emperor body slowly dissipated. As he dissipated, he suddenly said, Yenner, I'm sorry for my father. Little emperor raised his head. His eyes were confused, but he could not find the answer in the end. Accompanied by the true shadow of Zhen Wuyang completely disappeared. The void battlefield was completely dead. Jian Wushuang, who had recovered a little bit, let out a sigh of relief. If it weren't for the appearance of True Wuyang True Shadow, he would have already turned into blood in that Sangyu Bell at this moment. And Xiao Dijuan stood there, seeming to recall the scene that happened just now. Sun Yan, do you think you can escape? At this time, an angry shout resounded from the depths of the void, and then the chaotic void was illuminated, and the evangelists headed by Gong Ziyu did not leave but turned back. At this moment, his eyes are full of anger, and he can't wait to swallow up the little emperor. Jian Wushuang secretly said a terrible cry. He didn't expect that young master Yu would be so bold that he even dared to return. At this moment, he hasn't even recovered half of it. It is probably a difficult task to deal with these dozens of immortals, and young master Yu, who has endless means. If young master Yu offered another piece of Wangu immortal device, he would be really powerless to return to heaven. Thinking of this, Jian Wushuang looked at Xiao Dejundeo. You better go. I must be really unable to stand it here. Xiaodajin heard this and smiled and said, The reason why I turned back is to replace you. Now you are driving me away, but it's too unreasonable. Listen to me, you can no longer stay. Chapter 49-23. With Diqing as the head, the 7 Yangxians descended. Chunqing, Chuanxiu, Cuijing, Zhaoting, Weiliujia, Fengshan. None of them were absent. My lord Bongshan is late. A blast resounded through the void. Fengshan shouted angrily, his bare chest, like a true peak, swept towards Jian Wushuang. Immediately afterwards, Chunqing, Spring and Autumn went forward one by one, with an unrelenting momentum. Today they have all returned to their heyday. The heavy damage suffered before has been restored to the peak period by Diqing. Rank 9 Dian Immortal was still terrifying, although Diqing Yuan did not recover, but they still easily recovered. Their battle was just to rescue Jian Wushuang. Boom! Fengshan, who looked like a savage bull, directly tore a crack in the Yanli barrier with all his strength, and then slammed into it. Why are you here? Seeing this scene, Jian Wushuang was both surprised and delighted. Of course I will come later, or the Lord is in danger. Fengshan flushed, and he desperately stuck in the middle of the crack, not allowing it to close again. Sir, I can't hold it anymore, so hurry away. Chunqing followed closely. He directly drew out the real sword from his waist, and lay it directly in the middle of the crack. Then he said, Brother Sword, little emperor, go. Jianwu doubled his head, no longer hesitating, and directly pulled up Xiao Dijuan and the thin purple robe, and rushed out of the crack. Damn it, kill all of them, not one. Young Master Ziyu was already completely frustrated, damaged its Sangyu Bell, and got into so many seats, Yan Xian, yet he couldn't capture the next young Master Yan. He could no longer remain calm. Only the remaining 40 or so Yangxians rushed forward again, knowing that this extremely unequal battle had quietly reversed. It seems that there are only 7 ordinary Yangxians, and the remaining 6 Yangxians except Di Qing are enough for them to drink a pot. Chunqing, Chunqiu, Chuijing, and the others all had 2 or 3 D-pin pills in their mouths at this moment. Once they were injured, swallowing them directly would restore most of their physical strength in an instant. After being led by Chunqing and Fengshan, Chuanqiu sent a large number of D-pin pills, all of which were used to repair the heavy damage. After Jian Wushuang quickly stuffed Xiao Dijuan and Thin Purple Robe a few, the rest of his brain was stuffed into his mouth. Nearly 10 D-pin pills were put into the mouth and directly turned into violent energy that impacted the limbs. Unexpectedly, he almost burst Jian Wushuang's fairy body. All injuries were immediately cleared and restored to peak state. At this moment, Jian Wushuang only felt that the meridians in Xian's body were about to explode, and he needed to vent out. His eyes were crimson, and the surging patterns all over his body had almost doubled or more. And then he looked at Gong Ziyu in the distance. The 4 eyes were facing each other, a great crisis between life and death, which shocked Gong Ziyu. The next moment, Jian Wushuang went straight to him. The void collapsed, and a crimson streamer cut the void forward. Unable to restrain the restless Jian Wushuang in the immortal's body, he probably didn't even know it. He had already unconsciously opened the way of killing. Quickly stop her, Gong Ziyu said in shock, and at the same time backed away quickly. Nearly 10 Yanxian arrived first, holding their respective forces, trying to hold Jian Wushuang. But at this time, he is no longer in the previously unrecovered state. Jian Wushuang in his heyday was already able to fight the 3rd-ranked Dian Immortal, let alone them. The praying man arm is a car, and he does not have his own strength. Jian Wushuang, who was in charge of the way of killing, didn't even turn into an invisible sword, and slammed a heavy punch directly. This heavy punch is enough to easily destroy the universe. The Scarlet Fist and the wind smashed out, and the first Yanxian who came to greet him was too late to make any sound. He was directly blasted into blood mist and disappeared. Moreover, the fist's strength and the wind did not diminish. After smashing the first Yanxian, another 6 Yanxian killed. Boom boom! The blood mist was permeating, and there were only 3 Yanxians who stepped forward to block them. Gong Ziyu was already shocked, and he didn't plan to stay here anymore. He turned and flew over the immortal formation that was far away. Go away! Jian Wushuang, who had been slightly changed by the way of killing, was furious. Facing the Yanxian who had less than 30 in front of him, he chose to rush over. Boom! Boom! Each punch is enough to destroy a source of immortality. Jian Wushuang is like a demon who surpasses the heavens and slays all immortals neatly. All Yanxian was so vulnerable in front of him. Even unable to defend, they were smashed to the Xian Yuan and fell miserably. It was only a few dozen breaths of time, and only 7 of the 30 Yanxian were killed. They were all terrified, no longer dared to resist, and fled straight into the wild. Want to go? Jian Wushuang sneered coldly. He raised his palm, and suddenly thousands of chain-like scarlet light beams scattered in all directions. The 7 immortals fleeing in the wild and wild were instantly caught, and then dragged to him. My lord, let me wait, we don't want to be an enemy of my lord. It's all because of the 3 highness. Without finishing a sentence, the 7 Yanxians were directly strangled into pieces by the scarlet chain. Jian Wushuang was never soft on his enemies. As for letting go of his life, it was a fantasy. After slaying all Yanxian, he directly flew towards the young Master Yu who was about to flee. The murderous intent in his eyes is great, and he has listed it as a must-kill target deep in his heart. Seeing getting closer and closer to the fairy formation, Gong Ziyu let out a sigh of relief. However, just as he was about to rush into the immortal formation, a great crisis of life and death surged in his mind. He did not even think about it, and tried his best to hide away. Boom! The power of Scarlet came over the sky, and directly destroyed the fairy formation. Along with the violent force of the sky, Jian Wushuang, whose eyes sinking like water walked slowly, cold sweat falling from the sideburns. Gong Ziyu stood there, shaking uncontrollably. Judging from the previous style of acting, Jian Wushuang, who had cut the grass and roots, and was extremely cold, obviously did not intend to let him leave. He knew with great confidence that Jian Wushuang would not be afraid of him, because he was the son of the third emperor, and would not dare to start. It is precisely because of this that Gong Ziyu has fallen into despair. He never thought that one day he would actually be so close to death.